Serafina's Poe. Serafina! I jolted awake in bed, hearing my name from the urgency in my mother's voice on the phone. Her voice trembled through the phone, sharp and brittle. Mom? My throat was raw. She hadn't reached out in 10 years, not unless it was the worst kind of news. Your father. Her breath hitched, then broke. He's been attacked. My stomach clenched. Ice-cold fear gripped me. What? Oh, Sarah, he's barely clinging to life, my mother sobbed brokenly. I immediately threw the covers off me and jumped out of bed. Send me the hospital address, I said in a shaky voice. I'll be there as soon as I can. I tried not to make too much noise as I rushed down the stairs so I wouldn't wake my son, Daniel. The light underneath my husband, Kieran's office told me he was still up. As alpha of the pack, he always had too much to handle. And if I were honest with myself, too much resentment toward me. A decade-old mistake had bound us together, a mistake he'd never forgiven. So I didn't plan to bother him. By the time I slid into the driver's seat, tears streaked down my face. My father had always been invincible, unshakable, the giant of my heart, even if he'd never wanted me as his daughter, even if he'd hated me. But I never imagined he could be taken from me like this. I slammed my foot on the accelerator. When I reached the hospital, my mother and brother sat like shadows outside the operating room. My chest tightened. Would the giant really fall? I hesitated. I couldn't bring myself to step closer. Not when their disgust had exiled me long ago. After that night 10 years ago, they'd erased me. To the world, they had only one daughter now, Celeste. Should I even be here? It had been 10 years since we last spoke. Even after Daniel was born, all communication with the family had gone through Kieran. My father had made it clear he never wanted to see my face again. Would he really want to see me now? What if he didn't? What if his resentment hadn't faded? I hesitated, my pulse pounding in my ears until the sharp swish of the operating room doors cut through my thoughts. The doctor walked out, pulling gloves off his fingers. Doctor! I rushed forward before I could stop myself, my voice shaking. How is my father? The grim expression on his face said it all. I'm sorry. We did all we could, but his injuries were far too severe. I pressed a hand to my mouth, choking back the sob clawing up my throat. Is he? Gone? Ethan, my brother, barely glanced at me before addressing the doctor, his voice rough. Not yet. The man shook his head slowly, but he won't last the night. He's been asking for his daughter. I took an instinctive step forward, then froze. His daughter. It couldn't be me. After 10 years of indifference and resentment, the daughter my dying father wanted to see would never be me. Ethan's laugh was ice. 10 years, and our family is still paying for your mistakes. I turned to face him, tears streaking my cheeks. A decade since I'd last stood this close, since he'd looked at me. Time had sharpened him into a true alpha, broader shoulders, harder jaw, a dominance that rolled off him in waves. But the hatred in his eyes, that hadn't changed. My heart gave a vicious twist, like claws raking flesh. Because of you, he snarled at me, Celeste moved away. Because of you, she can't be here. Because of you, Dad will die with his last wish unfulfilled. Yes, it's all my fault. My laugh was bitter, weighted with decades of pain. After all these years, I'm still the first one blamed. No one cares about the truth or how I feel. Tears burst forth, my outburst freezing Ethan for a heartbeat. But just as quickly, his voice turned razor sharp. Your feelings? You stole your sister's fiancé and dare to talk about feelings? My nails dug deep into my palms, reopening that ugly old scar. 10 years ago, at the blood moon hunt, I'd just turned 20, the age when every werewolf finds their mate. After a lifetime of being overlooked, I'd been desperate for that bond. As a child, I'd foolishly dreamed it might be Kieran. But then he fell for Celeste, perfect, radiant Celeste, the darling of the entire Frostbane pack, and I learned my place soon enough. What was I? The Alpha's defective daughter? The one who couldn't even shift, nothing. When even my own family and pack barely spared me a glance, how could Kieran possibly want me? I never expected to change anything. But that night, when I heard about his impending engagement to Celeste, the pain cut deeper than any claw. For the first time, I let myself drown in drink. I expected to wake up forgotten in some dark corner. Never did I imagine I'd find myself naked in Kieran's bed. The liquor had burned through my senses. That night remained a haze of fractured memories. Before I could piece together what happened, Celeste burst in, her shrieks slicing through the air as she took in the scene. Then came the chaos. Celeste's hysterical sobs, Kieran's guilt-ridden apologies, the pack's venomous whispers, my stammered explanations, all silenced by my father's resounding slap across my face. I regret ever bringing you into this world. The aftermath played out in muted horror, Kieran carrying Celeste's unconscious form to the infirmary, Ethan snarling at gawking packmates, my mother's muffled weeping, and father's eyes, gods that look of pure revulsion. I'd always known he despised me, but never with such intensity it stole the breath from my lungs. I didn't. My whisper died unheard. No one listened. No one. Overnight, I became the pack's favorite sin to punish. Where they'd once mocked my defective shifting, now they spat horror like a benediction. Even low-ranking Omegas cornered me in shadowed corridors, their hands and insults alike too bold. Females crossed themselves when I passed, hissing, "husband thief," like a curse. The weight of it crushed me. When Celeste's admirers left death threats carved into my door, I gathered what little I owned and fled under a new moon. I intended to vanish forever, until the morning sickness began, until the physician announced my pregnancy to the entire blood council. That was the only reason Kieran married me. He was an honorable man, an alpha who would never desert his heir. Yet it tore my family apart. My parents and brother hated me for breaking Celeste's heart. Kieran's pack, Nightfang, loathed me because I was not the Luna they wanted. And Celeste was so enraged, she moved abroad. "You ruined everything." Ethan's accusing voice cut through my thoughts. The venom in his glare cut deep, undiluted after a decade. Blood may have made us siblings, but Ethan had never once treated me as his sister. Celeste was the only sister he cherished. He loathed me for driving her away. But was it truly all my fault? I may be weak and ordinary, but never so vile as to deliberately seduce my sister's lover. Yet they never cared. They just needed someone to blame. See this? My hands trembled, but my voice hardened like winter frost. My voice was never heard. My existence never mattered. So tell me, Mom. I turned to face her, throat constricted. If you never wanted me, why didn't you just smother me in my cradle? Why pretend I still mattered enough to call me here? How dare you speak to Mom like that? Ethan roared, his canines lengthening. Marrying Kieran didn't magically make you Luna material. That title was always meant for Celeste. I never asked for any of this, I snarled back, bitterness filling my tone. I was ready to disappear. You could have let Celeste and Kieran have their perfect mating ceremony and pretended I never existed. Ethan's lips curled mockingly. Don't play the martyr, he sneered. You knew damn well Kieran would never abandon his pup. Ethan, Mother's command carried the faintest echo of her former Luna authority, though her scent now held only exhaustion and grief. Enough. We will not waste your father's final moments on this old blood feud. She couldn't even look at me as she said, Go see your father. Her gaze darted away like the sight of me pained her. Ethan shot me one last venomous glare before slumping into a chair. Steeling myself, I pushed open the door. The fear nearly choked me. Fear of seeing that familiar disappointment in his eyes one last time. But when I saw him lying there, the man I'd spent my life both fearing and longing to please. Gone was the towering figure of my nightmares. The father who'd once seemed invincible now lay motionless, his chest swathed in bandages, his face ashen. The eyes that had always burned with contempt when they looked at me now held nothing at all. Tears streamed down my face. Why did this hurt so much? This man, this giant who'd hated me from the moment I presented as a wolfless, who'd looked at Celeste with pride and me with shame. The memory of our last meeting still clawed at my heart. There had been no wedding for Kieran and me, no celebration, only my father's iron grip forcing my hand to scrawl my name on the marriage paper. Now you've gotten what you wanted, he'd snarled, his alpha power choking the air between us. From this day forward, you are no daughter of mine. I'd never wept so violently, never begged so desperately, but all I earned was the frozen line of his back and his final, venomous curse. Your birth was a mistake, Serafina. Dare to show your face again, and I swear you'll never know another moment of happiness. He kept his promise. His curse had poisoned every moment of my life, while my honorable husband turned our marriage into a gilded cage with his endless silence and contempt. I should have hated them all, this family, this fate. But when my father's fingers twitched weakly on the sheets, my traitorous heart lurched. Before I could think, I was at his side, clutching his ice-cold hand. "Dad?" My voice trembled with something dangerously close to hope. His pale lips parted slightly as if struggling to form words. But before he could speak, the heart monitor screamed. The line on the screen flattened. "No!" The cry tore from my throat. He couldn't leave, not like this. Not before I saw forgiveness in his eyes. Not before we could unravel the knots binding our hearts. The door burst open. Ethan and Mother shoved me aside, sending me crashing to the floor. "He's gone." Mother collapsed against Ethan, her body racked with violent sobs. "My mate, my alpha." Ethan's grief choked him silently until his gaze locked onto me. His wolf was on the surface, teeth bared. I didn't doubt for a second he'd rip my throat out until Mother caught his arm. "You viper," he hissed. "Whatever scrap of happiness you've clung to, I'll rip it from you." A hollow laugh echoed through my mind. Why were they all so obsessed with stealing my happiness? Something I'd never had. The doctor entered, murmuring to my mother, "Luna, we must prepare Alpha Edward's remains." I numbly walked into the hall, my soul scraped raw, tears falling unchecked. As the pack's elite arrived, none acknowledged me, just as it had always been. But their indifference barely influenced me now. I stood numb before the chamber holding Father's body, still unable to grasp the truth that he would never open his eyes to us again, until Kieran's voice cut through the silence. "My deepest condolences, Margaret." He took my mother's hands, every inch the dutiful son-in-law. "Rest assured I'll assist Ethan with every arrangement." Moonlight from the windows gilded his broad shoulders, the silver streaks at his temples only heightening the aura of a prime alpha in his prime. Not a hair out of place despite the midnight summons. The deadliest alpha of the Nightfang pack. Just his presence was enough to control the air. "Your presence comforts me, Kieran," Mother wept, clutching his arm. When he embraced her, those piercing dark eyes found mine over her shoulder, then flicked away as if spotting a stain on the wall. "What exactly happened?" he asked as he turned to Ethan. "How could Edward get attacked?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "Routine border patrol. But the bastard rogues came in numbers we've never seen, armed with silver weapons." His throat worked as he fought for control. It was an ambush. Father never stood a chance. My mother's renewed sobs filled the corridor. Kieran gripped Ethan's shoulder. "The rogues will pay for this," he vowed. I hovered at the periphery, an outsider in my own family's tragedy. The three of them, Mother, Ethan, and Kieran, stood united in their grief, an unbreakable circle I couldn't penetrate. "I've sent for Celeste," Ethan added suddenly. "She should be arriving soon. Oh, my poor girl." Mother wept into her hands, to miss her father's final moments. My gaze flickered unbidden to Kieran's face, our eyes locked again. His expression remained unreadable, arctic, assessing, utterly devoid of warmth. 10 years sharing a bed, yet he still felt galaxies away. I'd never touched his heart. And now, with Celeste's return, a terrible truth crushed my chest like an iron weight. I was about to lose my second family. If my wolf lived within me, she would have whined low in her throat. I didn't know if I could survive the coming storm, but one thing burned brighter than fear. No matter what arrived, no one would take my son from me. No one. Serafina's Pove. The fragile silence was shattered as a piercing cry echoed down the sterile hallway. "Papa, where are you?" Every head turned in unison. My stomach plummeted as Celeste came into view, her golden hair whipping behind her, cheeks flushed from running. Her eyes were rimmed with tears, but her beauty remained utterly breathtaking. After 10 years, my sister's sudden appearance struck me like a physical blow. I almost instinctively turned to Kieran, whose mouth had fallen open, staring at Celeste like she was a dream he was scared to wake up from. The raw longing in his eyes was enough to answer the question that had haunted me for a decade. His heart had never been mine. "Tell me I'm not too late," Celeste begged, her voice breaking. When no one answered immediately, her knees buckled. Kieran moved faster than any werewolf had a right to. He caught her before she hit the ground, cradling her against his chest as my mother and brother descended into the huddle. Their tangled limbs and shared sobs painted the perfect family portrait, one I'd never been part of. The thought clawed at my throat. I'd lost my father too. Didn't I deserve to mourn? But this was Celeste's world. It always had been. From the moment she'd taken her first steps, everyone had watched her, admired her, loved her. As Celeste shone, I became a shadow. And now, as her whimpers filled the room, I might as well have been invisible. The exit beckoned. Better to leave with what little dignity remained than wait for their inevitable rejection. Not a single head turned as I slipped away. My tears had dried by the time I reached home, leaving salt tracks on my cheeks, but the hollow ache in my chest, that felt like it would linger forever. My first stop was Daniel's room to check up on him. I was surprised to see light under his door, and when I pushed it open, I found my 9-year-old curled into himself, knees drawn to his chest like a tiny fortress against the world. "Mommy?" His voice was too small, too knowing. I perched on the edge of his race car bed. "Sweetheart, why are you up?" He worried, his lower lip between his teeth. "Something's wrong with Grandpa Edward, right?" The air left my lungs. How did I tell this bright-eyed boy that the man who'd taught him to track deer just last summer was gone? I smoothed his pajama-covered knee. "Honey, there was an incident tonight. Grandpa got hurt. He died." Daniel's whisper held an eerie certainty. "Our bond. It broke." My hand stilled. At 9, he shouldn't have been able to feel the pack bond severing. Yet here he was, demonstrating the very wolf sensitivity I'd spent his lifetime praying he'd inherit. Relief warred with awe. He wouldn't be like me. Wouldn't bear the shame of being the alpha's defective child, a werewolf whose wolf never manifested. "Come here, my brave boy." I gathered him close, breathing in his scent of maple syrup and childish sweat. However much I regretted that disastrous blood moon hunt, I'd never regret the miracle it gave me. Daniel was the one pure thing in my life, the only heart that loved me without conditions. As I tucked the spaceship-patterned blanket around his shoulders, he turned those soulful eyes on me, Kieran's eyes in miniature. "You and Daddy will always be here, right?" The question lanced through me. I feathered my fingers through his hair, just like I had when he was a baby fighting sleep. "Oh, my love?" How could I explain that his father had never truly been mine to keep? That the way Kieran had looked at Celeste tonight, like the sun had risen after a decade of darkness, was a look he'd never once given me? That their embrace in the hospital corridor had been more intimate than any he and I had shared in 10 years of marriage? "Mommy's not going anywhere," I promised, pressing a kiss to his furrowed brow. "Your daddy and I love you more than anything," I whispered. "Nothing will ever change that." His sleepy smile gutted me. "Night, Mommy. Sweet dreams, my heart." I kissed his forehead, lingering a moment too long before slipping out. The kitchen's fluorescent lights buzzed as I rummaged through the fridge. Glass bottles clinked, then froze mid-reach at the sound of the front door. "Kieran, home already." I'd expected him to stay all night at the hospital, comforting her, reconnecting with her. He moved through the darkened house like a shadow, his broad shoulders filling the kitchen doorway. Moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face as his gaze swept over me. Empty, always empty. The refrigerator hummed between us as he reached past my shoulder. His cedar and rain scent enveloped me for one treacherous heartbeat before he withdrew, cracking open a water bottle. "Did you want something to eat?" My voice sounded too small in the silence. "You missed dinner." Nothing. Just the working of his throat as he drank, the corded muscles flexing beneath stubble I'd never been allowed to touch. The crushed plastic hitting the recycling bin made me flinch. He braced himself against the countertop, head bowed like Atlas bearing the world. I knew this dance by heart, 10 years of speaking to a ghost. "I'll just..." I edged toward the doorway. "Serafina..." My name in his mouth was always a shock, like being doused in ice water. I turned slowly. Moonlight carved hollows beneath his cheekbones, his expression unreadable as ever. "We need to talk." The quiet words sent a bolt of dread through me. His grip on the counter turned his knuckles bone white. No preamble, no softening, just Kieran's brutal efficiency as always. "I want a divorce." 10 years? 10 years I'd waited for this axe to fall. Funny how it still cut like a surprise. Serafina's pove. The words shouldn't have hurt. Not after a decade of waiting for this moment. Yet they sliced through me like silver, the pain radiating from my shattered heart to every nerve ending. I'd always known that Kieran would eventually ask for this. Especially now. Celeste, his first crush, his real love, back. It didn't matter that I'd loved him since we were children, long before Celeste ever noticed him. It didn't matter that I'd given him a son. The moment she returned, I became invisible, just as I'd always been in his eyes. Celeste was the dazzling diamond, blinding everyone to the plain pebble at her feet. I knew this. So why did it still feel like my soul was being ripped in two? It's because of Celeste, isn't it? My voice was eerily calm. I already knew the answer, but some masochistic part of me needed to hear him say it, needed him to twist the knife deeper. Kieran's eyes flashed, the first real emotion he'd shown me in years. No, he snapped, jaw clenched. Of course not. Liar. He dragged a hand through his dark brown hair, exhaling sharply. Edward's death just reminded me life's too short to waste on a mistake. A mistake. I would have preferred the knife. Would have rather he screamed Celeste's name than reduce our marriage, our son, to a regret. I couldn't help but laugh out. The sound was jagged, hysterical, tearing from my throat as Kieran stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. I laughed because the alternative was screaming. My gaze traced the lines of this man I knew yet didn't know at all, this stranger I'd loved for 18 years who had never truly seen me. Who was more pitiable, him or me? He loved Celeste. Yet honor and a single mistake had chained him to a marriage he never wanted. What had these 10 years given us? If not for that night, if we hadn't been forced into this loveless union, would his eyes have held even a flicker of warmth for me? We were never meant to be like this. Even though I could never regret Daniel, I'd meant it that night. I'd been ready to vanish. I should have run farther, should never have stepped into that clinic, never let them know about the pregnancy. I'd told myself staying, enduring, was for Daniel's sake. But now, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. What kind of life had I given him with parents whose hearts were oceans apart? While Celeste was gone, Kieran had played the part of a dutiful father, but now she was back, and the fragile facade of our marriage would shatter. I won't let my son watch his mother become a laughingstock. Fine, I said at last, the laughter dying on my lips. Kieran's brows lifted. Had he expected tears? Begging? Had he wanted to see me break? Too bad. My entire life, people had hungered for my surrender, but I refused to give them another ounce of my pain. When I walked away from this marriage, I would take only two things: my dignity and my son. I want full custody of Daniel. His shock morphed into fury. The hell you will! He's my son. And mine, I snarled back. You can't take the pack's air from his alpha. Kieran's voice shook with barely leashed rage. And you can't take a mother's heart from her chest. My hands trembled, but my voice didn't waver. I don't want your money, your property, anything. Just my son. Daniel was my only light in this wretched world. If Kieran took him from me, I wouldn't survive it. And most importantly, you and Celeste will have new children. The words stole the breath from my lungs. Just the thought of it, of her giving him the pups I never could, made my chest ache like a fresh wound. But for Daniel, I would endure anything. Even this. I watched Kieran closely, his expression unreadable in the dim kitchen light. Finally, he gave a single stiff nod. Fine, you can have full custody. The catch, he agreed so easily. Not a single denial, not one word to contradict what I'd said about him and Celeste. He still preferred a family with her, didn't he? And the most pathetic part? Some foolish, desperate corner of my heart had still hoped, still waited for him to say something, anything, to prove our marriage hadn't been just a prison sentence to him. I pressed my palms to my stinging eyes. Gods, what was wrong with me? I couldn't afford to hope anymore, not tonight. If I didn't leave here soon, I'd collapse right here on the cold tiles. Then Kieran caught my wrist. He cleared his throat awkwardly, his grip warm against my skin. We can wait until after the funeral to finalize everything, if you prefer. For one dangerous moment, I almost believed him. Almost thought this was kindness. If only he'd shown me this consideration once in 10 years. I wrenched my arm free. No need to delay. It's not like there's much to dissolve. You never even gave me a mating mark. The one thing he'd refused when we married. That and loving me. Your wolf never came, he'd said that night we got married, his voice carefully blank. A mating bond would only cause you pain when we inevitably divorced. He hadn't finished the sentence, but we both knew. Just like we both knew the real reason, the mark belonged to Celeste in his mind, always had. The bitter truth settled in my chest. He'd planned for this ending from the very beginning. What difference did it make now? Whether it was pity or premeditation, the result was the same. My neck remained unmarked, my heart remained broken, and Kieran would walk away free. Kieran's brow furrowed deeper. Serafina, there's no need for bitterness. Our marriage was a mistake. I only hope we can both move on. His voice softened, that hint of pity making my stomach churn. You deserve. Oh, spare me. I turned away before he could see how his pity cut me deeper than his anger ever could. Don't worry, I've saved enough to support myself and Daniel. You'll be free by tomorrow. The shock on his face was almost comical. Had he truly expected me to fight for him? To beg? Yes, I loved him. I still do. But 10 years of trying to thaw his heart had taught me this. No amount of warmth could melt a glacier that didn't want to be moved. And now that Celeste was back, did he think I'd delude myself into believing I ever stood a chance? Why crush what's left of my pride just to feed an alpha's ego? I'd learned my lesson. A decade in this loveless marriage had been enough. I was done fighting for people who never wanted me. My steps were numb as I climbed the stairs, memories of Kieran flashing like ghosts behind my eyes. The bright smile he'd given me when we first met as children. Me watching from the shadows when he won his first hunt. The way my heart shattered as he placed the victory garland on Celeste's head, her lips meeting his in a sweet kiss. The blur of liquor glasses when their engagement was announced. That catastrophic night that started it all. Then, Daniel's birth, his first steps, every milestone since. Halfway up the staircase, Daniel's sleepy voice echoed in my mind. You and Dad will always be here, right? My heart lurched. Gods, how do we tell him? I whirled around, my earlier resolve cracking. How do we explain this to Daniel? Kieran paused mid-sip of water. I'll handle it. Of course, he's already planned for this too, my fists clenched. And you needn't worry about finances, he added stiffly. Daniel is still my son. I'll cover his expenses, and yours. I couldn't read his expression. After 10 years, the view I knew best was still his poker face. But this time, I refused to waste energy deciphering him. Tomorrow, once the papers were signed, we'd be strangers. As he wished. I turned without answering. The bedroom door clicked shut behind me. Then the dam broke. Silent sobs racked my body as I slid to the floor, the day's grief finally overwhelming me. Somewhere downstairs, the floorboards creaked. Kieran was probably already packing, probably already picturing Celeste in this house raising my son. My hand flew to my unmarked throat, where his teeth should have been, where a mating bond should have sealed us together. It's okay, Sarah, I whispered into the hollow dark, arms wrapped tight around my shaking ribs. You'll survive this. For my son, I'll survive anything. Serafina's pov. I returned from the lawyer's office feeling like my soul had been put through a shredder. Walking through the front door gave me a strange kind of anxiety. Maybe it was because I knew this was one of the last times I would be here again. I let my gaze roam the foyer, taking in every detail. Daniel's baby picture on the mantel, the portrait taken of Kieran when he was ordained alpha, the picture of Daniel and me on his 5th birthday. There were no pictures of Kieran and me. Shocker. I headed straight to Kieran's office. I had left early in the morning, not wanting to run into him and have an awkward conversation about the upcoming divorce. I'd also been avoiding Daniel, I think. How could I look into those innocent eyes and explain that his family was breaking apart? I don't get it. Daniel's small, confused voice stopped me outside Kieran's office. The door was slightly ajar, and I saw Daniel sitting in a chair in front of Kieran's desk like a visitor. Kieran sat opposite him, looking at our son with a tenderness he never showed me. He leaned forward and took Daniel's hands in his. Mommy and Daddy won't be living together anymore, champ. But why? Daniel's lower lip trembled. Don't you love Mom? I tensed. How was Kieran going to answer that? Surely he wouldn't tell our son he didn't love his mother, but the only other option was to lie. Kieran sighed and stood from his seat. He walked over to Daniel's side and took his hands again, crouching to our son's level. You know, your mom gave me the greatest gift in the world, he said. He reached up and gently patted Daniel's head. You. And for that, I'll always love her. My chest tightened. For 10 years, I desperately wanted to hear those words from Kieran, and now there they were, while I held divorce papers in my hands. but I knew what they truly meant. Kieran only married me because I gave him Daniel. He only tolerated me for a decade because I was the mother of his heir. It was more proof that our marriage was one-sided. His true, unconditional love was reserved for Celeste. A choked sound escaped me. Kieran went rigid. His head snapped up, wolf-quick, those gold-flecked eyes narrowing at the door. "We don't spy on private conversations," he said coolly, rising to his full height. The alpha voice, the one that made the pack members bow automatically. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. "Mommy!" Daniel stood and went to me, throwing his arms around my waist. "Hi, honey." I kissed the top of his head. "Is it true?" he asked, looking up at me with wide, glassy eyes. I stroked his head. "Danny, give your mom and me some space, okay? Go help Chef with dinner preparations." Daniel pouted. "But now." That single word carried the weight of command. I squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "We'll talk more at home, baby. Go on." Daniel sighed and walked out, his shoulders slightly slumped. I closed the door behind me. Kieran's gaze dropped to the papers in my hand. Something unreadable flickered across his face. "I assume those are the papers?" I nodded, suddenly feeling nervous. My lawyer drafted the agreement, stating the custody terms. I moved forward and placed the document on the desk. Everything's clearly outlined: visitation schedules, holidays, education decisions. Kieran opened the folder and pulled out the documents. His eyebrows furrowed in concentration as his eyes darted over the pages. I also met with a realtor," she suggested, I continued, clasping my hands before me. "She showed me a lovely house about 30 minutes from here. It's fully furnished, ready to move in, and the mortgage is very reasonable. It's in neutral territory, so you can visit and eat." "Where's the fire?" I paused, frowning at Kieran. "What?" "I'm the one who asked for a divorce." He dropped the papers on the desk. "Yet here you are with moving plans and legal documents before the ink's even dry. Were you counting down the days?" The truth burned my tongue. Yes, every single one of the 3,652 days we'd been married. But admitting that would only give him more ammunition to use against me in the custody battle I feared was coming. Kieran scoffed at my silence and sat back in his chair. "Leave the address of your new home," he said. "My son and I will have dinner, then I'll send him your way, along with your signed copy of the papers." The finality in his voice extinguished my hope of one last family meal. Of course, the great alpha Kieran wouldn't deign to break bread with his soon-to-be ex-wife. I left Kieran's office, the hole in my chest yawning further. I hadn't been able to sleep last night after the news, so I'd used that time to pack all my belongings. I'd never been given a proper chance to make this place my home, so everything I owned fit into 2 suitcases. After loading my car with it, instead of driving away, I just sat in the driver's seat. I stared up at the house before me, recalling all my memories. The ones I'd made with Daniel were bright and colorful, filled with love and laughter. But the memories of Kieran were gray, dull, and empty. Every stilted conversation, every withheld touch, every smile he saved for someone else. The shrill ringtone shattered my reverie. My mother's name flashing on the screen sent ice through my veins. 2 calls in as many days after a decade of silence? The universe clearly had jokes. "Hi, Mom." I forced cheer into my voice. "How are you holding up?" She bypassed pleasantries like always. "Is it true?" My fingers tightened around the phone. "Is what true?" "That you're finally divorcing Kieran." The breath left my lungs. Of course she knew. Kieran had probably called Celeste last night. "Yes." I ground out between clenched teeth. The sound of my mother's relieved sigh cut deeper than any blade. Actual God's damned relief. "It's for the best," she said. "The marriage was a mistake to begin with. This is the correction we've all been waiting for." My mouth fell open. A single, betrayed tear slipped free. What kind of mother celebrates her daughter's heartbreak? The answer came swiftly and bitterly. The kind who always wanted her other daughter to win. I hung up without another word and powered off my phone before she could twist the knife further. Just then, the front door opened and Daniel walked out. Kieran walked out after him, shouldering a large duffel bag. I frowned. No way that was all Daniel's things. Kieran was making a point. It didn't matter that we moved. Daniel's home was still here. Daniel saw me in the car and his eyes lit up. I exited the car as he rushed to me, and I hugged him. "I said I'd bring him over," Kieran snapped, coming closer. I'm sorry. I just wanted... Is this how it's going to be? He cut me off. It's bad enough you're moving my son away from me, but you're also cutting into my time with him? Daniel's small hand tugged at Kieran's sleeve. Dad, it's okay. His voice was soft but steady. We'll see each other tomorrow at Grandpa's funeral. Kieran's jaw clenched hard enough to crack stone. For a heartbeat, I thought he might argue, but then he exhaled sharply and ruffled Daniel's hair. Yeah, tomorrow, champ. His gaze flicked to me, cold and dismissive. Be good for your mother. He handed the duffel bag to me and went back inside without another word. I swallowed the lump in my throat and loaded the bag in silence. Daniel climbed into the passenger seat without complaint, his two wise eyes watching me carefully. As I pulled away, I forced myself not to look back, not at the house, not at the life I'd failed to make work. 2 minutes into the drive, Daniel rummaged through his backpack and produced a slightly squashed sandwich. You didn't eat dinner, he said simply, pressing it into my hand. The tears I'd been trying so hard to hold in spilled out. Daniel, my voice cracked. Do you hate me for this? For taking you away from your dad? He considered it with a solemnity no 9-year-old should possess. My heart stalled, braced for the blow. No. He fiddled with his seatbelt. I know you were sad a lot. Maybe now you can be happy. A sob tore free, the road blurred. His small hand slipped into mine, squeezing tight. Don't cry, Mom. His whisper was fierce with promise. You've got me. I'll make you happy. I brought his knuckles to my lips, tasting salt and hope. So what if Kieran never loved me? This remarkable boy did, wholeheartedly, unconditionally, and in that moment, it was enough. More than enough. Serafina's povey. Another sleepless night. The irony wasn't lost on me. I hadn't shared a bed with Kieran in years, yet the unfamiliar silence of this new house felt louder than any absence. Every time I closed my eyes, the ghosts of what might have been danced behind my lids. 3 times I'd crept down the hall to check on Daniel, only to find him curled peacefully under his Star Wars comforter, his breathing deep and even. Thank the moon for small mercies. This modest house might lack the imposing security of the Alpha Manor, but I'd fill every inch with enough love to compensate. When Dawn's pale fingers finally pried through my blackout curtains, a lead weight settled in my stomach. Today, we'd bury my father. I dressed slowly, each movement weighted with dread. It wasn't grief that paralyzed me. Our relationship had died long before his heart stopped beating. No, it was the prospect of facing my family's judgmental stares, of standing across a coffin from Kieran while our divorce papers gathered fresh ink. Ex-husband. The terms scraped against my raw nerves. Daniel's door creaked as I pushed it open. My bear he sat, already dressed in the miniature black suit we'd picked out together, his small fingers deftly maneuvering his Nintendo Switch. Morning, Mom. He flashed me a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Tears pricked my lashes. Where had my baby gone? The boy staring back at me wore Kieran's strong jawline, his piercing gaze, a living reminder of everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Look at you, I whispered, smoothing his lapel, all grown up. Sadness shadowed his face, but he steeled himself and put the video game console aside. Let's go, he whispered, shoulders squaring with forced bravery. But when the old stone church loomed into view, Daniel's courage faltered, his knuckles whitened around the car door handle. Hey, I cupped his tense shoulder. Talk to me. When he turned, the unshed tears in his eyes shattered me. We didn't get to say goodbye. Does that mean Grandpa doesn't know we loved him? The question hit like a silver dagger between my ribs. While my father's absence had become my normal, Daniel had lost his favorite storytelling partner, his secret cookie supplier. I pressed my palm over his thundering heart. Grandpa's right here, my love. My voice cracked. And here, I tapped his temple gently. As long as we remember him, he's never really gone. Daniel exhaled shakily, some of the tension leaving his small frame. Okay. Ready? His nod was all the strength I needed. Together we stepped out of the car. The church doors swallowed us into a sea of mourners. Pack members in their finest black, allies from neighboring territories, and a scattering of human associates who'd done business with my father. The air hummed with whispered condolences and the cloying scent of lilies. My family sat like royalty in the front pew. My mother's head rested against Ethan's shoulder while Celeste, gods. Even in grief, My sister looked like she'd stepped from a magazine spread. Sunlight through stained glass windows gilded her perfect blonde waves, her designer dress clinging to curves that had always made my own frame feel boyish in comparison. "Daniel, darling." My mother's arms opened wide as we approached. Not for me, never for me, but for the grandson who carried the Blackthorn name, the grandson who mattered. I watched numbly as Daniel was enfolded in her embrace, his small frame disappearing against her black lace. That left only one vacant seat, sandwiched between Celeste and the end of the pew. My sister's glacial blue eyes raked over me, a decade apart, yet her hatred hadn't dimmed. She inched away as I sat, the silk of her dress whispering against the pew like a snake's warning. Trying to force my thoughts away from the family who didn't want me, I let my gaze wander round the hall and land on another family that didn't want me. The Blackthorns occupied the opposite side of the aisle, Kieran's broad shoulders cutting an imposing silhouette beside his parents. Leona Blackthorn's lips pursed when she noticed me looking. Like my family rejected me, the Blackthorns refused to accept me. To them, I was Kieran's legal wife, not his Luna. His mother, Leona, still held the title of Luna even after the Alpha title was passed to Kieran. Now she regarded me icily. I'm sure she was ecstatic over the divorce news. The stain on her family was finally gone. A small, warm hand slipped into mine. Daniel had extricated himself from my mother's clutches and now formed a living barrier between me and Celeste. His fingers squeezed mine. A silent "I'm here." I squeezed back, drawing strength from this remarkable child who shouldn't have needed to be the brave one. The organ's mournful chords signaled the service's start. Just a few more hours. I could hold myself together that long. Couldn't I? I had to give Celeste credit. Her timing was impeccable. She waited through the entire service, waited through the graveside ceremony as we each scattered handfuls of earth onto our father's coffin, waited until the crowd dispersed, leaving only Daniel and me watching the gravediggers begin their solemn work. "How thoughtful of you to offer help with the funeral arrangements." Her voice sliced through my grief like a silver blade. I stiffened, but didn't turn. I meant it. The hollow ache in my chest deepened. My single text offering assistance had gone unanswered. My mother's silence spoke volumes. With Celeste back, I was more obsolete. Celeste's laugh was all sharp edges, as if anyone would accept anything from you. The wind carried her cloying jasmine perfume as she stepped closer. 10 years, sister," she hissed. 10 years you played house with my life, but I'm reclaiming what's mine, my family, my position." Her breath warmed my ear. "My Kieran." I almost started laughing in front of my father's grave. The absurdity. Celeste had always owned them all. Their love, their loyalty, Kieran's heart. None of it had ever truly been mine to lose. "Welcome home," I murmured to the freshly turned earth. Today was about honoring my father, not fighting battles I was destined to lose. Celeste always won. The crunch of gravel announced her departure. I didn't need to look to know she'd gone straight to Kieran. Could picture perfectly how Leona's face would light up, how Kieran's arms would open instinctively. When Daniel shifted beside me, I caught the confirmation in my periphery. Celeste tucked against Kieran's chest like she belonged there, smirking over his shoulder. "Mom?" Daniel's small hand found mine, my brave boy standing guard between me and the world. "Can I go see Grandma?" The plea in his eyes undid me. However much they rejected me, Daniel deserved his family. "Of course, sweetheart." My kiss lingered in his hair as he dashed away. From across the field, I watched Christian scoop Daniel up with grandfatherly ease, Leona fussing over his suit. At least they loved him, the one good thing to come from this sham of a marriage. Alone now, I faced the gaping hole in the earth, the gaping hole in my life. "Goodbye, Dad," I whispered to the wind, my tears falling not just for the father I'd lost, but for the daughter he'd never truly seen. I turned from my father's grave, my heels sinking into the soft earth as I made for the sanctuary of my car. I'd wait there, alone, invisible, until this miserable affair was over. I was halfway out of the gravesite when chaos ensued. 1 minute, a somber afternoon pierced only by muffled sobs. The next, a nightmare of snarls and screams as rogues poured from the tree line like shadows given teeth. Daniel. His name was a prayer on my lips as I whirled back, scanning the chaos. My brother's wolf stood guard over our mother, his fangs dripping crimson. Across the clearing, Kieran's massive golden-brown form circled Celeste, of course. No one looked my way. No one remembered the wolfless daughter, the defective mate, the easy target. The rogues noticed. Yellow eyes locked onto me as gaunt forms slunk closer, nostrils flaring at the scent of my fear. "Daniel!" My scream tore through the cacophony. Where was he? Who? A crushing weight slammed into my back, claws tearing across my skin. I hit the ground hard, the world tilting as I scrambled backward. Above me, an emaciated rogue wolf loomed, rancid drool splattering my cheeks as it snarled. This was it. After everything, I'd die on my knees in the dirt. My gaze darted desperately through the fray. My shoulder was on fire, hot, thick liquid trickling down my back, but all that mattered was Daniel. Please, I silently begged whatever deity was listening, just let me see him one last time. The rogue lunged. Just before he bit my head off, a black blur intercepted midair, the sickening crunch of bones echoing as the attacking wolf was hurled aside. Towering over me, hackles raised and fangs bared, stood a massive black wolf I'd never seen before, Kieran's Pove. The scent of Serafina's blood still haunted me. I couldn't purge that scene, rogues swarming, Daniel safe with my parents, Celeste needing my protection after years of neglecting combat training. But when those fangs flashed toward Sarah, when her blood flooded the air, thick with pain, my heart stopped. Every alpha instinct roared to shield her, my ex-wife, my son's mother, the mate I'd never publicly claimed. Yet before I could move, another shadow got involved first. I should have been grateful when that stranger tore the rogues apart. Should have thanked the moon when he saved Sarah's life before it was too late. But watching him shift back, cradling her against his bare chest, a snarl ripped from my throat before I could choke it back. My canines throbbed, my vision bleeding amber. Mine. My wolf, Ashar, snarled. The word was a lie. I had no right to it. Not after the divorce papers. Not after a decade of denying her my mark. Denied her the title of Luna. What kind of alpha claims ownership over a mate he never truly claimed? So why did the sight of his hands on her waist make me want to paint these fucking trees with his entrails? How is she? My mother's voice on the phone dragged me back to the present. Daniel wants to know. I glanced at the closed door of the treatment room in the ER in front of me, a cocktail of unfamiliar emotions stirring in my stomach. How was she? I didn't know. I'd seen her dress in tatters, seen the blood pouring down her back, but I wasn't the hero who'd saved her, wasn't even the one who brought her here. Just the useless ex-husband, waiting for news. No updates yet. No one had come to tell us anything. She had to be alive. She needed to be alive. How would I explain to Daniel if anything worse had happened to Sarah? How would I justify protecting another woman instead of his defenseless, wolfless mother? Self-loathing burned through me. Whatever had passed between Sarah and me, hurting Daniel was the last thing we wanted. The door opened, and Serafina walked out. Her right hand was in a sling, bandages poking out from under the rolled-up sleeve of the shirt. Because she didn't have a wolf, she wouldn't be able to heal as fast as werewolves did. The thought of her having to nurse the pain and deal with injury like a mundane task gave me an uncomfortable, gnawing feeling. Her head was turned inward, smiling at whoever was in the room. A doctor or nurse. Thank you. I will. Yep. Then she turned, and our eyes met. I'd always thought Serafina had beautiful eyes, flecks of green swirling in blue like fish in a cerulean sea. For 10 long years I had deliberately avoided looking into them too deeply, refused to acknowledge the devotion that once shimmered in their depths. I told myself I couldn't forget she was the woman who'd ruined my life. Couldn't surrender again to that dangerous allure and betray my love for Celeste. But now, seeing those same eyes regard me with nothing but glacial indifference, my heart clenched. Her smile fell. It was like that sea had frozen over, and there was nothing, not even anger for failing to protect her, just icy regard. Sarah. Sarah? I'd almost forgotten Margaret next to me. She had been sitting in the corner silently praying to the moon goddess since they'd wheeled Sarah in. 2 hospital visits in 1 week. I doubted she could handle losing another family member. As soon as she spotted Sarah coming out, she sprang up, rushing toward her daughter. Sarah broke our gaze to view her mother, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. Oh, darling, look at you. Margaret's voice trembled as she reached for Sarah's injuries. Excuse me, Sarah stepped back, leaving her mother's hand suspended in empty air. Who are you calling? It can't be me. If you're looking for your darling, her gaze cut past Margaret to where Ethan and Celeste stood. She's right behind you. Sarah! Ethan interjected, his alpha tone sharp with disapproval. Mother's just concerned. What did the doctors say? Since when does my survival matter to any of you? The ice in her voice was a blade to the chest. This wasn't the Sarah I knew, the woman who'd once clung to our rare kindness like sunlight, who'd shaped herself into whatever might earn a scrap of our affection. The doctors said I'll live, she continued, that glacial stare flicking to me. But then again, a cold smile. Who cares about an expendable nobody, so long as the important people are safe? That's not. Where is my son? She cut off Margaret, turning to me with eyes stripped of all their former tenderness, as if I were just a stranger to her now. At home, I answered stiffly, with my parents. I'll go get him. She gave a curt nod before walking toward the exit. Wait. My hand shot out, catching her wrist. Daniel is safe where he is. You're in no condition to care for him right now. Her gaze dropped to where my fingers circled her arm, brow furrowing. I released her but blocked her path. The rogues who attacked today are likely the same ones who targeted your father. This wasn't random, Sarah. They're systematically hunting the Frostbane Pack members, trying to... What does that have to do with me? The ice in her voice made the room collectively inhale. For fuck's sake. Sarah, Ethan snapped. Are you really this dense? You're in danger. I stopped being a Frostbane member years ago. Her voice was a whip crack, which means I'm safe. Sarah, listen. I dragged a hand through my hair, frustration spiking. And I'm not part of your pack either. She took a step closer, eyes glinting like shards of diamond. Is this some new ploy to take Daniel from me? What? I looked at her, unbelieving. Then I don't understand why you're all standing here trying to stop me from getting my child. Have you lost your mind, Sarah? Margaret exclaimed. I've given you what you wanted. A shrug, feigning nonchalance. The divorce is signed. I've moved out. The funeral's over. There's no reason for us to keep talking. My jaw tightened. Sarah, that's not. Try to take Daniel. She locked my eyes, a promise sharpened to a killing edge, and you'll learn how sharp my teeth are, with or without a wolf. I exhaled through my nose. Let me drive you. Sarah froze. So did Celeste. I felt her stare burning into my back. Shit. I schooled my features into something colder. Your car's still at the cemetery. Divorced or not, you're still my son's mother. That makes you my responsibility. No. Her laugh was bitter as wolfsbane. You already proved my point. Even when you're right beside me, you don't choose me. I won't trust my safety to someone who's resented me for a decade. Sarah. The warning in my voice should have made her flinch. She didn't even hesitate, just walked out. And fuck if that didn't feel like a silver bullet to the chest. Sarah was a viper. Her distance should have been a relief. So why did the line she'd drawn between us make me want to tear the whole goddamn world apart? Celeste's touch startled me. This is just temporary, right? Her fingers trembled against my arm. We won't have to keep doing this? I forced my attention back to her, to the woman I'd loved for years. My rightful Luna-to-be. Nothing changes. I covered her hand with mine, squeezing. You'll always come first. Kieran, she sobbed into my chest. With father gone, I don't feel safe. I need you. I've got you, I murmured, pulling her closer. No one will tear us apart again. Celeste nestled deeper into my embrace, her tears dampening my shirt. Yet my traitorous gaze kept drifting to that empty exit where Sarah disappeared. The unease coiled in my gut. Why? Seraphina's Pove. Mom. Daniel unfolded himself from Christian Blackthorn's lap and raced to me as soon as I stepped in through the front door. I exhaled, catching his body against mine in a one-armed hug. I pressed his head against my chest, feeling his little heart thunder against me. He was fine. He was safe. My family had failed me in countless ways, but at least they'd protected him. I was so thankful for that. Hi, baby, I whispered into his curls. Daniel pulled back and eyed my injured arm, wrapped in bandages and a sling, his face tightening. You're hurt. His voice wobbled. I shook my head, cupping his cheek to pull his gaze away. It's okay, my love. I pressed his head against my chest again, kissing his hair. I'm okay. He clutched onto the fabric of the shirt I'd borrowed from a nurse, and the shudder that ran through him seemed to reverberate through me. It's okay, Mom. His voice was muffled. "I'll take care of you." I closed my eyes as a tear slid down my cheek. "I know you will, baby. My strong, beautiful boy who loved me in a world where no one else did. We'll take care of each other." "Is this how you conduct yourself?" Leona's voice sliced through the moment. "Entering my home without so much as an acknowledgement?" I looked up. The blackthorn sat entwined on the couch, Leona's glare as sharp as ever. Once, that look would have sent me scrambling to apologize, to prove myself worthy. Yet now, looking between Leona and Christian, I waited for that pathetic part of me that always sought their validation to flare up. But nothing. No fear, no anger, just hollow acceptance. The chaos of today had changed something. It felt like a switch had been flipped inside me, and I just didn't care anymore. This family had drained me dry, and I was done bleeding for them. I ruffled Daniel's curls. "Go say goodbye to your grandparents, Han," I said, my voice steady. Daniel's arms reluctantly dropped from around my waist, and he moved to Leona and Christian. I tried not to notice how Christian's arms circled Leona's waist, how natural their affection was. A lifetime ago, I'd foolishly dreamed Kieran might one day hold me like that. The memory almost made me laugh. After Daniel had hugged his grandparents, I took his hand and walked out of the house wordlessly and... Speaking of sights that stung my eyes, Kieran's familiar black G-Wagon was in the driveway. He was at the passenger side, and I watched as he grabbed Celeste's tiny waist and helped her out of the car. Bracing her hands on his shoulder, she looked up at him with adoration, and he looked at her with a tenderness he'd never once shown me. I waited for jealousy and bitterness to pull in my belly, but again, that nothing feeling. Just a dull ache behind my eyes. "Is she why?" Daniel's quiet voice stopped me cold. I turned to see my son staring ahead, at Kieran and Celeste, stonily, his dark eyes narrowed. "Is she the reason why Dad is leaving us?" I inhaled sharply. Celeste had left before Daniel was born, and he'd never met her. I wondered if any of my parents had told him about his aunt, the one whose man his mother allegedly stole. At that moment, Kieran and Celeste saw us. A muscle ticked in his jaw, and his hand dropped from around her waist. A brief expression crossed Kieran's face, and I must have been hallucinating from my painkillers because it looked a little bit like... guilt? I remembered the question I'd asked Kieran when he dropped the divorce bomb. "It's because of Celeste, isn't it?" "No," he'd lied. "Of course not." I forced a smile, cupping Daniel's chin. "No, baby," I lied, my voice too bright. "Of course not." The words tasted like ash. I hated lying to my son, but even more than that, I hated the idea of him getting hurt in any way. Whatever rocky relationship Kieran and I had was between both of us. I didn't want to expose Daniel to any unnecessary drama. Daniel's shoulders relaxed. He believed me. For now. "Come on." I took his hand, steering us away. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Daniel lift his hand in a small wave to Kieran. I kept walking, but the weight of someone's gaze burned between my shoulder blades, hot enough to scar. "Are you okay, Mom?" Daniel asked, tugging the thick duvet over my shoulder. "Do you need anything else?" I smiled. He'd meant it when he said he'd take care of me, opening doors, helping me take an awkward clothed towel bath, and even putting a bowl of mac and cheese in the microwave. It was cold in the middle, but I devoured the whole thing like it had 5 Michelin stars. Just one more thing. I pulled the duvet open, patting the space beside me. Daniel grinned and, with a half-hearted eye roll, climbed in. We hardly ever slept in the same bed anymore on account of Daniel being way too old for cuddling. As far as I was concerned, such a thing wasn't possible. As long as I was alive, he was my baby and would always be the perfect age and size for cuddling. I gingerly draped my injured arm around his waist, and he cradled it in his arms. "Does it still hurt?" I tucked his head under my chin. "Not when I'm with you." There was a soft silence in which Daniel idly trailed a finger over the bandage. "Mom?" he said quietly after a while. "When I grow up, when I get my wolf, I'll protect you. I promise." My throat constricted with emotion, and I closed my eyes tightly against the tears that immediately swam to the surface. Behind my eyelids, the faces of my so-called family flashed. My mother's performative grief, Kieran's infuriating indifference. 10 years I'd wasted trying to earn their love. 10 years of begging scraps from people who'd gladly watch me starve. But then, a rogue's fangs, a shadow leaping between us. Strong arms lifting me, the press of a tattoo against my cheek, the nurse's giggles when I'd asked about my savior. Oh, that alpha? He carried you in like you were made of glass. An alpha who protected the weak. He'd saved many other wolves in the attack, mainly omegas. That only opened up a myriad of questions. The strong usually didn't bother with the weak, especially since I didn't know him from anywhere. So who was this alpha with a thing for weak wolves? Whoever he is, I hope I get to thank him someday. My fingers brushed the bandages on my arm, for protecting the wolfless, defenseless little Sarah. Daniel was still sleeping when I woke early the following morning. I scoffed slightly, affectionately stroking his hair. Too old for cuddling my ass, I murmured. He was wrapped around me like a baby koala. My muscles ached, and my back stung like a bitch. Still, I dragged myself to the kitchen, grabbed a box of Hungry Jack, and began putting breakfast together. I'd barely plated the first pancake when there was a knock on the door. I glanced at the clock. 6:30. Not only was it early, but it was also unusual considering we'd just moved to this house, and I couldn't think of anyone who would visit us at this time. Kieran, maybe, but I laughed softly to myself at the ridiculous thought. When I opened the door, however, the laughter died in my throat. Standing before me, his broad shoulders filling the entire doorway, was a man I'd never met. What stunned me, however, was the shocking sense of familiarity I felt at the sight of him. I squinted against the early morning sun, which shone in my eyes and darkened his features. As if he noticed my discomfort, he shifted, blocking out the sun, and I could suddenly see him clearly. Jet black hair pulled into a man bun at the nape of his neck, dark blue eyes like an evening sky, a strikingly handsome face, and I gasped as my eyes dropped down to his right arm, to the swirling sleeve of black ink covering it. It was he, the alpha who saved my life. Serafina's Povey. Hi, Sarah. His voice was deep and smooth, mildly amused, maybe because I was staring at him with my eyes popping out of my head. When I didn't move or say anything, he chuckled, the sound rumbling in the space between us. I see I must have caught you at a bad time. He turned to walk away, and I gasped out of my frozen state. Wait, he turned back, an eyebrow raised. It's you. His lips twitched. Lucian Reed. He stretched out the tattooed arm to me expectantly. On autopilot, I reached out with my uninjured arm and took his hand. It was large and warm and swallowed mine. Serafina No, not Blackthorn. Not anymore. Not really Lockwood either. Besides, he already knew my name. Come in, please. I stepped out of the doorway and gestured into the house. Thank you, Lucian said as he crossed the threshold. He towered over me, almost as tall as Kieran, and I took an instinctive step back. This way. I led him to the living room and gestured for him to sit in the armchair. He sat in it as if it were a throne, and something told me he could drop into a pile of mud and make it look regal. His head swiveled, taking in the living room, the flowery wallpaper, the mismatched couches, and oddly matching side tables. Your home is lovely. I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic, but I waved the comment away. It came like this. I just moved in. As soon as I said the words, I dropped my gaze. Why was I telling this stranger my business? How are your injuries? He asked, nodding toward my bandages. My fingers brushed over the surface. They'll heal. I swallowed. Thank you. I should have said that the moment I opened the door. Thank you so much for saving my life. Lucian grinned, a full-toothed smile that made him look less intimidating. You're very welcome, Sarah. I worried my lower lip between my teeth. Can I ask, though? Why did you do it? Everyone was protecting what mattered to them. We don't even know each other. He shook his head, his smile fading into something softer. You may not know me, but I know you. He slipped a hand into his pocket and then stretched it to me. My eyes scanned the contents. Out of the shadows, I read out loud, looking up at Lucian in question. I'm the alpha of the Shadowvale Pack in the south, he said. And the president of. I glanced at the card again. Out of the shadows. Lucian nodded. It's a relief organization dedicated to helping wolfless and vulnerable wolves, omegas, outcasts, rogues. He shrugged. If a wolf needs help, OTS is there. Well, that explained a lot. That's noble, impressive, awe-inspiring. For someone who had spent her whole life being ridiculed and cast aside for being wolfless, it was a dizzying relief to find out that there was someone out there, a whole ass organization, who cared that much for my kind. You said you knew me, I said. How? Lucian leaned in, bracing his elbows on his thighs. I did some business with your late father. My condolences, by the way. I shrugged, ignoring the twinge of pain in my chest. It felt strange and uncomfortable receiving condolences for a man who'd hated me up until he drew his last breath. But there was another reason why I attended his funeral, Lucian continued. I cocked my head, frowning as he said, I heard Edward Lockwood's eldest daughter was wolfless. I could almost hear my mental walls slamming up, iron gates locking. What is this? I hissed. Were you targeting me? Did you save me so you could... I saved you because you were in danger, Lucian said simply, and I'm here to check up on your well-being. Are you checking up on all the other wolves you saved? No, he answered honestly. So, why me? Because I want you to join my organization. I blinked. He nodded. You're an alpha's daughter, an alpha's sister, and an alpha's wife. Ex-wife, I corrected immediately. Something twinkled in Lucian's eyes as he nodded. Forgive me, ex-wife. Either way, I believe your identity and experiences could inspire many werewolves facing similar disadvantages. It was a kinder word than the ones I'd heard my whole life. Disability, problem, impairment. I snorted. I'm not role model material. Lucian raised a brow. I'd say you've built quite a life for yourself and your son, even in light of your family's antagonism and recent divorce. It was slightly unsettling how much this stranger knew about me. The point is, Sarah, he said, I find you inspiring, and I know many others would too. OTS is more than a relief organization. We also offer the tools every wolf needs. We can train you, make you strong in your own right, so you never have to rely on someone else to save you. I glanced down at the card in my hands, then back at Lucian. He smiled kindly. You don't have to decide right now. Take some time to think about it. I nodded slowly. That I could do. Thank you, I said softly. You already said that. I laughed softly. Yeah, but no one had ever asked me to belong to something. Even my pack and family, with whom belonging should have been automatic, hadn't wanted me. But here was Lucian, who'd sought me out, who wanted me to be a part of something. It sounded almost too good to be true. Well, Lucian said, pushing himself to his feet, I should get going. I stood too and walked him back to the door. I hope you say yes, he said as he opened the door. I think this will be really good for you. I smiled hesitantly. I'll consider it. He shot me one last smile before leaving. Sighing, I leaned against the door, staring at the contact card in my hands. Out of the shadows, I whispered. What would that be like, I wondered. If the organization was filled with wolfless wolves like me, I'd be among my kind, so to speak. Could it be possible? Could I find a community that... A brusque knock on the door startled me. Smiling, I opened it. Did you forget some? Kieran glowered down at me, and it was like a bubble burst over my head, showering me with reality. So much for thinking his visiting me was ridiculous. What are you doing here? Kieran turned, and I followed his gaze to see a dark red Aston Martin pull out of my driveway. He must have encountered Lucian outside. What was he doing here this early? Kieran hissed, turning back to me. A strange emotion zinged through me, one I'd never felt with Kieran before, irritation. How is that any of your business? He stepped inside and walked past me into the living room, his head darting around. Hey, I called after him. You can't just... Did he sleep here? I blinked. Excuse me? Did he sleep here? Kieran repeated, like my question was one of confusion and not of indignation. I scoffed. Do you need a dictionary? I asked. What? Because you clearly need to be reminded of the meaning of divorced. Nothing concerning me is your business anymore, Kieran. He hadn't cared about anything pertaining to me over the decade we were married. How dare he attempt to show an interest now? His dark eyes flashed. I may not be your husband anymore, he snarled, but I will always be the father of your son, and you can't be bringing strange men into my son's home when... Oh, but it's okay to go around flaunting your rekindled relationship with Celeste in front of Daniel? I didn't know why I was so pissed. It wasn't like Lucian had actually slept over, or I'd done anything wrong. But that was the thing. Either way, it was not Kieran's business. Not anymore. You're a lot of things, Kieran, but I didn't realize you were a hypocrite. His eyebrows furrowed so deeply they almost merged into one. Excuse me. I pointed to the door. There, you're excused. Kieran let out an incredulous scoff. I don't know what has gotten into you lately, but this isn't you, Serafina. I let out a sharp bark of laughter. And how am I asked. How am I, Kieran? Because I can assure you don't fucking know me. You never did. In fact, I think this is the longest fucking conversation we've ever had. Kieran took a step forward. Mom? Dad? Kieran and I turned to see Daniel at the foot of the stairs, rubbing his eyes. Baby! I gasped, sidestepping Kieran to go to him. His curls were sticking around every which way, and I gently ran a hand through them. Did we wake you? He shook his head. Your phone alarm for school. I glanced at the clock, 7 a.m. Right. Daniel looked over my shoulder and gave Kieran a toothy grin. Hi, Dad. I stiffened slightly when Kieran stepped toward us, suddenly smiling brightly. Morning, champ. He waved a book I hadn't noticed in his hand earlier. You forgot this in my office last time you did homework. Figured you needed it for school. Daniel reached out and took it. Thanks, Dad. Then he sniffed once and turned to me, his eyes widening in delight. Are you making pancakes? I nodded. Daniel bounced on the balls of his feet. Can Dad come to breakfast? He turned to Kieran. Dad, can you come to breakfast? Absolutely fucking not. Danny, I'm sure your father would love to, Kieran said. Our eyes met over Daniel's head and something crackled in the air between us. They're just volatile and precarious. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I suddenly didn't have an appetite. Serafina's povee. The coldness wasn't unfamiliar, but there was an underlying tension that was new, tight, uncomfortable. Still, I plastered a smile on my face when Daniel asked me to pass the syrup and kept it on when Kieran asked me to pass the butter. I clamped my mouth shut as father and son conversed animatedly. I would always be grateful that whatever animosity Kieran carried for me never spilled over to our son. So even if he never loved me, I could rest assured that he loved Daniel. I couldn't remember the last time we'd had breakfast together, and doing it now, after we were divorced, was not only ironic, but just plain ridiculous. Although I would admit, to myself only, that watching Kieran devour the pancakes and eggs I'd made with gusto slightly appeased the anger and irritation I felt earlier. When breakfast was over, Daniel rushed upstairs to get ready for school, rebuffing my offers for help. I'm 9! He called over his shoulder as he went. I don't need my mommy to dress me. I might have laughed if Daniel's refusal of my offer didn't mean I was stuck stewing in the tension between Kieran and me. I cleared my throat and stood, reaching for Daniel's empty plate. Kieran moved too, faster than I, and grabbed it. I shot him a questioning glare. You shouldn't be doing dishes with your injured arm, he said, taking my plate out of my grip before I could protest. I raised an eyebrow, watching Kieran move to the sink, wondering what the hell had gotten into him. This was the man who'd never enjoyed a meal I cooked, who'd never spared a thought for who cleaned up afterward. The only conversations he'd ever initiated were curt notifications about when he'd be taking Daniel to family gatherings, ones I was never invited to. I'd grown accustomed to his indifference, to being a ghost in my own home. Yet now, after our divorce, here he stood in my kitchen, scrubbing dishes like our earlier argument had never happened. The kitchen bled into the dining space, one smooth line from marble island to wooden table, and I sank back into my chair, watching Kieran's back as his hands moved in the sink, making quick work through soapy water. It was a surreal sight, a version of him I'd never seen. The muscles beneath his t-shirt shifted and rippled as he moved, and I couldn't help but stare. At 4 inches over 6 feet, he towered over almost everything and everyone, and his body was covered with taut muscles, chiseled to perfection, a living monument to alpha perfection. I'd dreamed of this once. A normal domestic scene, wife cooking, husband cleaning, maybe me slipping arms around his waist, and he'd turn, landing a kiss. When I heard Daniel bounding down the stairs again, I averted my gaze, feeling my cheeks burn like I'd been caught doing something bad. Kieran wasn't mine to look at anymore. Not that he'd ever really been in the first place. I'm ready, Daniel announced, shouldering his Pokemon backpack. I smiled at him and stood up from my seat. Come-o! I'll take him to school. A large puff of frustration left my mouth in the form of air as I turned to Kieran. I'm perfectly capable of driving my son to school, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady and calm. I know, he said, but you should be resting, not overexerting yourself. I blinked. Since when did he care? For 10 years? Kieran had barely acknowledged my existence. Now suddenly, he was all up in my business? "Dad's right," Daniel piped up, coming to me. He wrapped an arm around my waist, and I automatically rested my chin on his head. "Go get some more rest, Mom." I exhaled. "Fine." I looked at Kieran and forced out a "thank you." He nodded once. After they left, I took a shower, painkillers, and then crawled into bed. But sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept averting to my eventful morning, until Kieran's infuriatingly considerate behavior hijacked my thoughts again. "Stop." I shook my head sharply, gaze landing on Lucian's parting gift. The contact card lay on the side table, an invitation. I grabbed my phone and typed into the search bar, "Out of the Shadows." The first result was a website, and when I clicked on it, I was bombarded with a slew of information. My curiosity was piqued as I read through. Founded 10 years ago, OTS had rapidly grown into something of a haven for werewolves like me, wolfless, weak outcasts. There were pictures, a virtual facility tour, and testimonials from wolves who had benefited from the organization's generosity. Something ballooned up in me as I drank in all the information, hope, a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in forever. So I copied the number on the card to my phone and sent out a message. "Hi, Lucian, it's Sarah. I've considered it. I'd love a tour sometime." And finally, "This is the sparring arena," Lucian said, waving his arm around the room with a flourish. Slowly, I spun, taking in the large circular space. We were at the final spot on the tour of the OTS headquarters. We hadn't bothered with the administrative wing of the building. "Boring numbers and papers, nothing fun there," Lucian had said. Then he'd shown me the several training facilities they had. He showed me the core pit, a sunken arena with natural stone walls for climbing and leaping, as well as logs, builders, and weighted chains for resistance training. Then there was the Moon Hall, where the wolves who could shift practiced restraints and meditation techniques to help them control their powers. There was an intricate outdoor obstacle course with trees, rocks, and trenches designed for both humans and wolves. There was even an underground den lined with moss, heated dens, and fire pits for resting, healing, and mental recovery. Overall, it was the most impressive building I'd ever been in, making Lucian Reed the most remarkable person I'd ever met for thinking to do this for a group of people that the world had written off. Like the general design of the OTS headquarters, the sparring arena was a sleek, open-air space reinforced with steel and obsidian. Lucian explained that the padded floor absorbed impact, while embedded sensors tracked movement and force. He pointed out transparent barriers that rose around the perimeter, allowing spectators to watch without interfering. "Does that happen often?" I asked, spectating. I imagined a roaring crowd cheering people on as they fought to the death like gladiators. Lucian shrugged. "It's mainly to track progress for feedback." I exhaled. "This also overwhelming," Lucian chuckled. "That's because you've never been in an actual training facility, have you?" He was right. I'd never trained before. My pack completely ostracized me for not having a wolf. Of course, I was never part of pack runs, and no one was willing to help me train in other aspects. "Is yours different?" I asked. He nodded. OTS has the largest training facility in Los Angeles, and since it's located in neutral territory, many wolves from other packs train here. Our trainers are equipped to teach even the most feeble werewolves. I swallowed tightly, feeling that hope rise higher. So, there would be someone willing to teach me. Lucian's smile was soft, kind. "I would teach you personally," I snorted, rolling my eyes. Lucian took a step forward, and my amusement faded as I craned my neck back to keep his gaze. "I'm serious, Sarah." My eyebrows furrowed. "But why would you? You're an alpha. Don't you have more important things to do?" His lips twitched. "Important? Yes, more important." He shook his head. "Nope." Oh, I'd spent my whole life being the less important choice, so I was thrown a little off balance. "What do you say?" he asked. "Ready for your first lesson?" I absent-mindedly rolled my left shoulder. It had been a week since the rogue attack, but my injury had healed nicely. The stitches were out, and other than the occasional annoying ache, I was as good as new, more or less. Training with Lucian would ensure I was never put in a vulnerable position where I could be injured again. "Yeah," I exhaled. "I'm ready." Lucian Reed, the alpha who saved weak wolves and paid them home visits, was kind, gentle, and warm. Lucian Reed, the trainer, was a sadistic bastard. Stop, I panted, holding a hand out as my knees buckled, sending me to the floor. Lucian paced in front of me, his combat boots thudding against the padded floors of the private training room. The arena was for sparring, but OTS had hundreds of private training rooms, each divided by sliding one-way glass doors where one-on-one training took place. It was where Lucian had made me regret ever being born. "Get up, Serafina," Lucian said. His voice was unrecognizable, hard, merciless. "You have more fight in you." "No," I wheezed, my hands trembling as I doubled over and tried not to throw up. "I don't." It had started with simple tasks, posture, stance, and how to make a proper fist. It had quickly escalated to suicidal drills, wall sits, burpees, bear crawls, push-ups, planks, and the absolute fucking bane of my existence, controlled fall and recovery, which essentially required me to throw myself down on the mat and pop back up with the speed that made me breathless and nauseous. I felt Lucian crouch down before me, and I half-panted, half-growled. "I swear, Lucian, if you make me—" I looked up to see him smiling down at me. The murderous trainer mask dissolved. "I expected you to tap out half an hour ago," he said, his voice dripping with pride. "I'm impressed, Sarah. I knew you had it in you." And even though Lucian was blurring at the edges, there was a suspicious ringing in my ears, and it felt like my heart was pounding in my belly. Pride flooded my veins. "You suck," I panted. He tilted his head. "So you don't want hot packs?" My hands gave out, and I rolled, sprawling on my back. "No, please." The workout clothes Lucian had supplied me were soaked through, and every muscle in me screamed in agony, but I'd never felt so elated. Lucian's face loomed over me, inverted, as he braced his hands on both sides of my head. "This is just your first session," he said. "Imagine how strong you'll be after several." I grinned, looking into his twinkling blue eyes. I imagined it, and a rush of adrenaline flooded me. The idea of not being weak, fragile, or useless. What the fuck? The sliding glass wall was dragged open, and I sat up like a spring, my head bumping Lucian's on the way. "Ow!" He cupped my face, pressing his hand to the spot that had made contact. "Are you okay?" he asked, wincing. A menacing growl pierced the air, and I glanced to the left in the direction of the intruder. My words died in my throat. Standing in front of me, in the space between the two training rooms, was Kieran, his dark eyes pitch black with rage. "Why the hell was he here?" Kieran's pove. "No, Celeste. Thumb over knuckle," Ethan reiterated for the 5th time, adjusting his sister's fist. "If you punch like that, you'll break your fingers." Celeste huffed, her lips forming into a pout. "Whatever. I still don't know why I even have to do this." Ethan exhaled and exchanged a mildly exasperated look with me. "We've been over this before. With all the attacks on the pack, you have to get stronger. I indulged you in the past when you refused to train, but not anymore. We even came here to train in neutral territory so you wouldn't feel inferior to other pack members." Celeste rolled her eyes. "I don't care. Training sucks, and I have you 2 strong alphas to protect me anyway." "Babe," I said, stepping forward, "no, Ethan and I will always protect you, but it's good for you to at least be able to hold your own in the event of the worst-case scenario." She sighed and stepped towards me. "But you mean it, right?" She looked up at me with her gorgeous blue eyes. "You'll always be there to protect me?" I kissed her hair. She'd come back to me, and I'd be damned if I ever let anything happen to her. Always. Okay. Ethan clapped his hands, drawing our attention back to him. "If we can just get your stance right, Celeste, we can move on. We can't spend all day here." "Right." She held up a fist, the thumb tucked inside her palm. "Like this?" Ethan clenched his jaw, and I pressed my mouth together to stifle my amusement. I moved across the room and leaned against the glass door dividing the training rooms. Stop! My ears pricked, and I turned toward the glass door. The female voice on the other side of the glass door sounded familiar. Whoever was in the adjoining training room had been going hard at it since we arrived, but this was the first time I heard a voice. I heard a muffled male voice speak. The reply from the female was equal parts sharp and exhausted. I knew the strangers next door were none of my business, but for some reason I couldn't pull my attention away. The female voice sounded so familiar. "At least Sarah's lucky," Celeste grumbled as Ethan corrected her stance. "Nobody's ever going to force a wolfless werewolf to train." My eyes widened as everything clicked into place. It couldn't possibly be, but I slid the glass door open, and rage, potent, unlike anything I'd ever felt before, slammed into me with staggering force. Sarah was lying spread-eagled on her back, and above her, his head so close to hers like he was about to kiss her, was a stranger. No, not a stranger, the man who had saved her at Edward's funeral. "What the fuck?" The words tore out of me before I even registered them. Sarah immediately shot up, her head bumping into the man's nose. "Ow!" He cupped her face, and impossibly, the rage doubled. They were both drenched in sweat, and their scents mingled in the air. Ashar growled, and I felt every muscle in my body tense. Celeste turned to me, and her eyes widened with shock. The bastard's hand was still cupping Sarah's face, and I had the sudden, jarring urge to rip his heart out. I had no idea why I was feeling this way, especially when the love of my life was a mere 2 feet away. Sarah's shocked expression quickly faded, replaced with that chilly countenance she'd picked up since the funeral that was really starting to piss me off. Ki? Celeste's hand on my back should have loosened the tension in my muscles, but instead they tightened even more. "What's Ro?" I didn't turn to her, but I saw in Sarah's face the moment Celeste noticed her. The man stood, finally taking his hand off Sarah's face, but immediately he held a hand out to her, which she took without hesitation, turning her gaze away from us. I ground my teeth hard as he pulled her up. "Thanks," she said, flashing him a smile that sent a white-hot spike through my ribs. "Why are both of you?" Ethan, too, stopped in his tracks when he saw his other sister. Sarah's sigh was unbothered, mildly annoyed, as if a bunch of neighborhood dogs had come skipping into her manicured lawn. "I'm going to hit the showers," she said to the man, ignoring all of us altogether. He braced his hand on her arm, and I had to grip the edge of the glass door to stop myself from flying across the room and ripping his hand off her and then off his body. "So that's it?" Ethan's cutting voice stalled their steps. "You can't even bother to acknowledge your family?" Sarah turned back to us with a sardonic laugh. "Family?" She pointed to me, and for some reason, my breath hitched. "He's not my family anymore." Her finger slid from me and waggled between Celeste and Ethan. "And you two? Never really be to begin with." Celeste bristled. "You absolutely have no grounds to be this much of a bitch all the time." "Save the lecture, princess," Sarah snapped back without missing a beat. "I just survived an hour of hell. I'm not sticking around for yours." Celeste choked back a shocked gasp, and her tightened grip on the back of my shirt snapped me out of my momentary shock. "Don't talk to her that way," I growled, stepping forward, blocking Celeste from Sarah's view. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deliberate step toward me, her chin lifting. "Or what, Kieran?" My eyebrow rose to my hairline. Who was this stranger, and what had she done with the meek, demure Serafina I'd been married to for 10 years? The man reached out and grabbed Sarah's hand. "Hey," he said in a calm voice. "Let's all just stay out of this," I growled, glaring at their joined hands. "This is a family affair. No one needs you meddling, whoever the fuck you are." The man chuckled and took a step forward, standing next to Sarah. "I'm Alpha Lucian Reed of Shadowvale Pack and the president of the organization that owns this building we're standing in." I finally had an identity for this meddlesome stranger, and I didn't like it one bit. But if he thought his credentials were going to make me cower, he had another thing coming. Every male in here was a fucking alpha. "And like Sarah said," he continued, "none of you are truly her family. She belongs to none of you. In fact, we might find that down the road, I become more like family to her than any of you." My brain short-circuited, not quite processing what he just said. Sarah, too, looked at him, her eyebrows furrowed in confusion. He smiled at her and brought her hand to his lips. "I plan to court her," he announced to the room, but his gaze was trained on her. "So I'd better start protecting her interests now." Okay, I was wrong earlier. This right now was the most rage I'd ever felt in my life. The room froze. Even Sarah's breath hitched. Then, with a smirk that made my vision pulse red, Lucian turned and strode out, pulling her behind him like a goddamn prize. The soft thud of the door of their training room seemed to vibrate through me. "What the hell?" Celeste's whisper cut through the silence. She leaned into me, her hand rubbing up and down my chest. "Can you believe them? What kind of stunt is she trying to pull?" but I wasn't hearing her. Not really. All I could see as I stared at the door was Lucien and Sarah's intertwined hands. All I felt was this confusing thing, this primal, irrational fury, burning through me like acid. Gavin's voice echoed in my head, the conversation from last week slamming back into focus. "She's the mother of your child. Of course you'll always care," he'd said, clapping my shoulder like that settled it. "But be careful not to screw up your second chance with Celeste. She's the one you really want." Logically, I knew he was right. So why did every cell in my body scream it was wrong? "Come on," Ethan muttered, already retreating. "Let's go." Celeste tugged my arm. "Key? I'll be right back." I was moving before I finished speaking, stalking toward that door like a man possessed. Maybe my concern wasn't completely irrational, I told myself as I strode toward the locker room. We knew nothing about this Lucien character. As Daniel's mother, Sarah needed to be careful. That's all this was, a warning, nothing more. Sarah spun with a gasp when I opened the door of the locker room. She was the only one in the room, standing before an open locker. Her shirt was off, bundled in her hands, revealing a spandex sports bra that pushed her cleavage out. Every muscle in my body locked. This reaction made no sense. I'd seen Sarah naked countless times before. We'd been married for 10 years, for Christ's sake. But now, watching the sweat glisten along her collarbone, seeing the rapid rise and fall of her chest, it hit me like a physical blow. "You can't date him." The words tumbled out raw and unbidden, sounding exactly like what they were, jealous and possessive. Sarah's initial frown melted into a breathy laugh that echoed mockingly through the tiled room. She held up her left hand. The bare part of her finger, where her wedding band had rested for 10 years, was noticeably lighter than the rest of her skin. "Do I need to get a special divorce ring?" she taunted. "Something to remind you that you lost all rights to dictate my life, and I can date whoever I want?" "No," Ashar growled possessively. "Mine." The dangerous combination of anger, lust, and possessiveness pushed my body forward. My hands slammed against the locker on either side of her head, caging her in. Sarah's gasp sent her chest brushing against mine, her lips parting in shock just inches from my own. "Mine," I snarled, leaning toward to capture her lips. "Serafina's, Pav." I felt the sting across my palm before I realized that I'd slapped Kieran. His head jerked to the side, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved, me, shocked that my ex-husband had tried to kiss me, him, stunned that I'd dared to slap him. How could this happen after we had already divorced? My chest heaved as I braced my hand against his chest and shoved him away from me. He didn't budge, both his arms caged me against the lockers, his body radiating heat like a furnace. The scent of him, cedar and something darker, wilder, flooded my senses, making it hard to think. "Have you gone raving mad?" I hissed, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. In all the years Kieran and I were married, he'd never once kissed me, not my lips at least. When we had sex, it was clinical, functional, a way for Kieran to take care of his needs. If at all his lips touched me, it was my neck or my tits, never anything so intimate as kissing me on the lips. So what the hell was this? "Did you take a hit to the head?" I shoved him again, but he was immovable, his dark eyes burning into mine. Beneath my palm, his heartbeat raced as wildly as my own. "Let me remind you of 2 things. 1, we're divorced. 2, your precious Celeste is right outside." That finally broke through whatever madness had gripped him. Kieran stepped back as if it pained him, his jaw clenched tight. For a moment, he just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and left. I stood there long after the door shut behind him, my breath uneven, my skin still buzzing where he'd touched me. A traitorous warmth coiled low in my stomach, one I refused to acknowledge. He's going back to her. The thoughts soured in my mind. I could still see them earlier, Celeste pressed against him like she belonged there. The perfect Luna, the perfect mate. I yanked my shirt back on, my skin still humming. No way was I showering here, not with them just rooms away. I needed air, space, distance. When I stepped into the hall, Lucien was there, rounding the corner with 2 water bottles in hand. "Here." He offered me one, his grip steady. "Thanks." Our fingers brushed, and I remembered his words from earlier. I planned to court her. I dismissed the thought. Lucien was a protector. He'd probably just said it to deflect the tension, and it had worked. But as I twisted the cap off the bottle, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. "Are you okay?" Lucian asked, glancing at the locker room door. "I thought you were taking a shower." I took a long drink of water, letting the cold liquid soothe me. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand when I was done. "I'll do it at home," I said, refraining from saying why. His lips pursed, and I thought he would protest, but he just nodded. "Okay, I can take you if you like." I shook my head, smiling. "I drove here, remember?" He chuckled a little self-deprecatingly. "Right. Well, if you need anything, Sarah, and I mean absolutely anything, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here for you." My chest warmed. When was the last time I had someone in my corner the way Lucian was? I'll keep that in mind. "Thank you, Lucian," I said. He beamed. "I look forward to our next session." I groaned, my whole body protesting with me. "Just kill me here and now," Lucian laughed. "That would defeat the whole point now, wouldn't it?" I didn't let myself think about what happened in the locker room until I was home. But as soon as I stood under the shower, the hot sprays washing over my sore muscles, I couldn't keep the thoughts at bay anymore. Kieran had never once exhibited any jealous or possessive traits, at least not when it came to me. Then again, it wasn't like I'd really garnered any male attention in the decade we were married. He'd always been cold with me, even when we had sex. I knew that all the extremes of his emotions, passionate love and fervent jealousy, were reserved for Celeste. But today, I closed my eyes, the water running down my face, and pictured the dark, murderous way with which Kieran looked at Lucian's hands on me. The rage he exhibited seemed an awful lot like jealousy, but I couldn't understand why. "Mine," he'd growled just before he tried to kiss me. I brought my fingers up to my lips, the water sluicing between them. I hadn't let him kiss me, but I still felt the shadow of his lips, the warmth of his breath against me. What would have happened if I'd let him? "Get it together, Sarah," I chastised myself sharply. After all, there was a more likely explanation than jealousy and possessiveness. Ego. Kieran was a proud alpha who probably had double the normal testosterone level of a normal man, and Lucian hadn't made things better by announcing to the room that he was interested in me, no matter how nice his intentions were. Two alphas had basically had a pissing contest, and it would have happened over a plot of land just as easily as it happened over me. I didn't need to read too much into it, not into the near kiss or Lucian's declaration, because the fact of the matter was the same. No one but Daniel truly wanted me. I'd made my peace with that a long time ago. When the hot water started to cool, I took that as my cue to step out of the shower. I headed downstairs and began preparing dinner in anticipation of Daniel's return from school. All the confusion and tension of the day faded away when I heard the front door open and close, followed by the sound of rushing feet heading for the kitchen. "Mom?" I turned in time to catch his hug, but couldn't help wincing when he squeezed my middle, drawing a protest from my abused abs. He froze and pulled back immediately, looking at me in horror. "Are you okay?" he asked in alarm. "Are you hurt?" I shook my head vehemently. "No, baby, not hurt, just sore." He frowned. "Why?" I shrugged. "Your mom had a training session today." His eyes lit up. "Like the kind Dad does?" I smiled. "Nothing that intense. Not yet, at least, but yes." The pride that shone in his eyes made every sore muscle worth it. "That's amazing, Mom. I'm proud of you." He beamed. "I wish I could grow up faster so we could train together and I could protect you." "Oh, baby." I pulled him to me again, and this time he was careful not to hold me too tightly. He truly was the greatest thing that had ever happened to me. I swore then and there that no matter how hard it was, no matter how much my weak body ached afterward, I would keep training. I would grow stronger and be the kind of mother my son could be proud of. A week later, the only thing keeping me from rescinding my vow was Daniel's proud smile every time I came home bruised and aching. Every day after dropping Daniel off at school, I headed straight to OTS headquarters, where Lucian, the sadistic bastard, devised innovative new ways to make me hate my life. When Leona and Christian asked to take Daniel camping on Sunday, I agreed wholeheartedly. I canceled training for the day and spent the morning giving my poor, abused body the rest it deserved. So you can imagine how utterly pissed I was when the insistent ringing of the doorbell interrupted my precious, delicious sleep and forced me to drag myself out of bed. "I'm coming, fuck!" I muttered angrily as I trudged to the door, tying my robe haphazardly around my waist. My hair looked like an abandoned raccoon's nest, and my breath stank to high heaven. I was hunched over, wincing with every step. I didn't mind, though. I know whatever asshole at the other side of the door deserved to have their eyes assaulted by my gruesome appearance as punishment for desecrating the sanctity of my rest day. When I opened the door, however, I immediately regretted my decision. I should have taken a shower, waxed, blow-dried my hair, and put on a full face of makeup, because even on my best days, I already paled in comparison to her. I didn't need to give her more of a leg up. Celeste? Serafina's povee. It took every ounce of dignity and self-respect I had not to cower and shrink under the cold disdain in Celeste's eyes as they roamed over my body, her glossy lips twisting in disgust. "Wow, Sarah," she sneered, shaking her head. "What the hell was I worried about?" she said almost to herself. I folded my arms, bracing them around me like they could shield me from the interaction to come. "What can I do for you, Celeste?" I asked, my voice measured, flat. She cocked her head. "You're not going to invite your little sister into your new home. How is life as a divorcee, by the way?" I clenched my jaw, bracing my feet at the doorway. "It's my rest day, Celeste. You interrupted a fabulous nap, and I'm sure you didn't come all this way to sneer and wrinkle your nose. So what do you want?" "I wonder about it a lot, you know," she said. I frowned. "What? What could you have possibly done to trick Kieran into bed with you that night? How did someone as fundamentally unattractive as you pull that off? How much did you fuck with his brain that he lost all common sense?" I closed my eyes, breathing through my nose. I was so not in the fucking mood for this. "Goodbye, Celeste." I grabbed the door and tried to close it, but Celeste braced her foot between the door and the frame. "Stay away from him," she hissed. I looked up at her. "Who?" "Kieran," she spat. "Who else?" I sighed. I was way too tired and sleepy for this bullshit. In case you didn't get the memo upon your return, Celeste, Kieran and I are divorced. Surely he mentioned that to you. And yet, you're still going around, shamelessly seducing him like the slut you are. I froze, waking up a little. "Excuse me?" Celeste's face morphed into something ugly and vicious. "He came back to the training room covered in your stink. You thought I wouldn't find out that you're still thirsting after my man?" The sheer absurdity of her accusation left me momentarily speechless. Kieran had tried to kiss me and somehow I was the villain? "He left you, Sarah," Celeste continued, each word a sharp-edged blade designed to cut. "He never wanted you 10 years ago, and he doesn't fucking want you now. Look at you and look at me. Do you really think he'd choose an ugly, wolfless slut over me, the woman of his dreams?" She stepped closer and her jasmine perfume wrapped around me like a poisonous fog. "You're nothing, Serafina," she hissed. "Do you hear me? Nothing. You have no wolf, no job, and now no husband. You will never amount to anything. Your destiny is to sit on the sidelines forever and watch me rightfully take my place as Kieran's mate, his wife, his Luna." I'd be lying if I said those words of hers didn't sting me deeply. I'd spent a lifetime hearing these. Wolfless, weak, unworthy, decades trying to outrun it. But after that night, I became a sinner forever, never deserving of any mercy. I'd groveled for scraps of their approval, played the obedient wife, swallowed all the accusations, even voluntarily walked away from my marriage, thinking distance might dull the ache. But none of it mattered. Here stood my sister, on my doorstep, oozing that same venomous smile she'd worn when she'd accidentally exposed my lack of a wolf to the entire pack. Memory fragments burned behind my eyelids. Mother turning away as the pack youths tripped me into mud. Father's dismissive snort when I begged for training. Ethan's indifferent eyes when his friends cornered me in the woods. Celeste's laughter when her minions pulled my hair hard. Leaning against the doorframe, I squeezed my eyes shut. The ugly darkness I'd kept caged for years rattled its chains. Why was I always the one begging? What sick part of me kept letting them win? Years of fury, humiliation, and swallowed pain erupted in a single breath. When my eyes snapped open, I gave a dark smirk at her. "You're right," I said sweetly. "You're his dream woman, and yet..." I let my smirk sharpen as I went in for the kill. For 10 years, it was my bed he came to, not yours. The effect was instantaneous. Celeste flinched like I'd slapped her. I considered doing that too, but my arms ached too damn much. The trick I played must have been a damn good one, I continued, enjoying the way she seemed to crystallize on my doorstep. I must have fucked with his brain so good, he couldn't go a day without fucking me. The look in her eyes, horror and disgust, didn't hold me back but stoked the darkness inside. I tilted my head. Tell me, have you two even slept together yet? Her flawless porcelain features cracked. I smiled more evilly. So that means you don't know about the adorable little birthmark on his left butt cheek, or the way his voice breaks when he... You bitch, Celeste seethed, and I could almost imagine steam coming out of her ears. I cocked my head. What's wrong? Can't handle the truth? 10 years is a long time, Celeste. You'd be surprised what can happen in a decade. Shut up, you vicious bitch. She clapped her hands over her ears, tears spilling down her perfectly contoured cheeks. How dare you? You stole those 10 years from us. This is all your fault. The way she sobbed, raw, ugly, childish, suddenly reminded me of her as a newborn. How she'd wailed until I rocked her to sleep in the nursery, her tiny fingers clutching mine. How I'd sneak her extra desserts when Mother wasn't looking. There was a time I'd have burned the world for her. When did we become this? Knives drawn, aiming for the softest parts, not caring if the other bled out. Celeste. My momentary triumph curdled into guilt. But she had spun on her heels, her ponytail whipping viciously behind her. I bit back a groan as she stormed down my driveway in 6-inch Manolos. In the mix of everything, it was easy to forget that Celeste, too, was a victim of what had happened between me and Kieran 10 years ago. But she just made it so damn hard to feel any lasting remorse towards her. Every single person thought she was a better match for Kieran and didn't hesitate to voice their opinions. I'd accepted it all years ago. I'd kept my emotions locked away until that night. I might have done wrong once, but haven't 10 years of silent suffering been penance enough? I gave him the divorce. I returned him to her. I had done everything to atone for my sins. Now all I wanted was peace. Was that too much? With a tired exhale, I stepped back into the house and closed the door. I trudged back upstairs, my legs heavy and the bitter aftertaste of my words to Celeste rank in my mouth. Some battles weren't worth winning. I sat at the edge of the bed, but didn't lie back down. As tired as I was no longer sleepy. My gaze brushed over my laptop on my nightstand, and a tired smile pulled at my lips as I reached for it. Sure, I might never measure up to Celeste. I may never have her effortless charisma or glamorous career, but despite the steady antagonism I faced, I had made something of myself. The screen of my laptop lit, a silent reminder of the one thing I'd built for myself in the past 10 years. Romance author. The irony wasn't lost on me. 10 years of crafting love stories while living in a marriage devoid of it. No one knew. No one cared. I'd planned to work on my next book today, a rare free weekend, but Celeste's venom had left me restless, my skin crawling with unspent fury. I needed to clear my head, so I headed into the shower, letting the hot water wash away the nastiness of Celeste's visit. Dressed in soft joggers and an old hoodie, I slipped outside, desperate for air. Although it was still morning, the LA sun shone brightly over the quiet Los Feliz neighborhood. I tilted my head up for a moment, letting the bright rays warm me. The sidewalks were damp from the early morning sprinkler systems. As I walked to the end of Ferndale Drive, the houses began to thin out. A couple of joggers passed me, earbuds in, lost in their private worlds. The entrance to Griffith Park appeared like a shift in temperature. The sidewalks turned to packed dirt under my feet, and the smell of flowers and wet leaves hung thick in the air. Tall trees arched close, filtering in the light. Birds chirped in the branches overhead, a melodic song that pulled a wistful smile out of me. I climbed onto a small wooden bridge that crossed the creek and stopped in the middle, leaning on the railing. I closed my eyes and took slow, calming breaths, inhaling the clean air and calming myself. My hard-won tranquility was shattered when my phone started blaring, a shrill sound that cut into the quiet of the morning. I huffed, fishing it out of my pocket. I rolled my eyes when I saw the caller ID. What now? Hell. What the fuck, Sarah? Kieran snarled down the line. I pulled the phone away, wincing slightly. You're gonna have to be more specific, I said dryly. What the fuck did you say to Celeste? I snorted. Of course, she'd gone running to him, no doubt leaving out all the unflattering details that didn't favor her, once again painting me as the villain. If she'd gone to him first before coming to me, then maybe I wouldn't have had to say and hear such ugly things. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling my earlier exhaustion return with a vengeance. Listen, Kieran. I heard the sound first, a sharp, explosive crack that shattered the quiet morning. Then I saw the birds take to the sky, screeching wildly. Then I felt it. Pain. Red-hot agony, unlike anything I thought was possible. What was that? Kieran's voice sounded like it was coming through a vacuum, muffled and distant. My head dropped slowly, and for a second I couldn't put the pieces of the puzzle together, couldn't reconcile the sound of the gunshot with the pain, with the blood seeping out of the hole in my chest. I think I just got shot? I mumbled, my words slurring as the pain spread from my chest to every part of my body. What? My knees buckled, and I crashed to the floor as the world around me turned black. Kieran's pav. I hated this feeling, the way my world tilted every time she bled, and I wasn't there to stop it. Sarah! My roar echoed through the phone. Sarah, answer me! Nothing. Just that horrifying thud after her slurred, I think I've been shot. The anger I'd felt moments earlier, when Celeste called sobbing about Sarah's taunts, evaporated. In its place, wildfire panic, scorching through my veins. I was out the door before my chair hit the floor. The tracking app on my phone, the one I'd kept active post-divorce, despite every logical reason not to, led me to Griffith Park. I drove like the hounds of hell were chasing me, cursing Sarah's stubbornness for moving so damn far away. What followed was a nightmare in fragments. Blood, so much blood, pooling beneath her as I pressed my hand to the silver bullet wound still pulsing in her chest. Speed, the longest 30 minutes of my life. Her labored breaths the only sound in my car as I ran every red light. Waiting. Pacing the OR hallway for 5 fucking hours, her dried blood cracking on my knuckles. Relief. The surgeon's words. Grazed her heart. No fatal damage, and the surgery was a success. Nearly brought me to my knees. Now, forehead pressed to the ICU glass, I watched the machines breathe for her. The urge to shatter the window warred with the need to fall apart. Her recovery now solely depends on her strength of will. I slid to the floor instead, Sarah's cut-up clothes clutched in my fists. The scent of her blood, fear, pain, copper, seared my lungs. Again. I'd failed her again. 2 attacks since our divorce. 2 times I hadn't been there. She was Daniel's mother. My responsibility, even if she wasn't my wife anymore. I should have assigned guards. A shudder racked me. Should have done a lot of things. An unfamiliar ringtone shattered the silence, Sarah's phone, buzzing from the bag of her bloodied clothes. I fished her phone out, and my heart dropped when I saw the caller ID. Mom! Daniel gasped when I answered. I pressed the heels of my palms to my eyes, swallowing back a curse. Hey, champ, I strained out. Daniel paused for a beat. Dad, I exhaled. Hey, how's camping going? Okay, he said slowly, tightly. We're back. Where's Mom? I looked over my shoulder at my son's unconscious mother. She's occupied right now, Danny. Dad? Yeah? Are you in the hospital? I froze. Daniel's perceptiveness was sometimes eerie. Dad? Daniel pressed when I didn't answer. His voice trembled when he spoke again. What happened? Is Mom okay? Is she hurt again? I exhaled. I couldn't bring myself to tell my son what had happened to his mother. The horrific details sat on the tip of my tongue and refused to fall out. Your mom is fine, I lied. Then where is she? I want to talk to her. Not right now, hon. She's on a trip. Without me? The betrayal in his voice gutted me. Last minute thing, I backpedaled. She left her phone by accident. Is it a training trip? I jumped on the escape. Yes, you know how hard she's been training. She's gone on a training trip. Oh, a skeptical exhale. Then why are you at the hospital? Are you hurt? I shook my head. No, bud, just some routine checks. Don't worry about it. Right? He didn't sound convinced. So when is Mom coming back? Soon, bud. But are you okay with staying with Grandma and Grandpa for a little while longer? What about school? I paused. If Sarah had been shot in the open park in broad daylight, there was no telling what other dangers were lurking around my family. I would be damned if someone else close to me got hurt. How would you like a break from school, champ? Serafina's povey. Consciousness returned in layers of agony. My eyelids felt like they'd been superglued together. My mouth felt dry and sandpapery. There was an itch under my right foot that was driving me crazy. Oh yeah, the god-awful, brain-fogging bitch of a pain that weighed on my chest. I woke up with a gasp, but that only tripled the pure agony radiating through my torso from where I'd been. Oh gods, I'd been fucking shot. Shit, Sarah? That voice, rough with exhaustion, thick with relief, tugged my attention sideways. It took monumental effort, but I turned my head just enough to see... Keh. His name dissolved into a pained groan and a throbbing in my chest that was not worth it. Hey, it's okay. His voice was a caress against my throbbing muscles, softer than I'd ever heard it. Kieran Blackthorne knelt beside my bed, my hand clutched between both of his lips brushed my knuckles, his exhale shuddering like he'd been drowning. Dark circles bruised his eyes. His hair stood in chaotic peaks, as if he'd spent days dragging fingers through it. He looked wrecked. "That's it," he murmured. "Thank you for waking up." The crack in those last words would have made my eyes widen if they didn't weigh 1,000 pounds each. Between the bullet wound and Kieran's inexplicable bedside vigil, I wasn't sure which was more shocking. The door opened then, bringing in external chatter from the hospital corridor before it faded as the door closed. A man in a white coat smiled kindly at me from the doorway. He had a name tag on, but I couldn't read what it said. "Mrs. Blackthorne," he beamed at me. "Well done." "Huh, miss." Once again, my tongue hadn't quite woken up, and I couldn't correct his mistake. Kieran didn't either. "You were quite lucky, Serafina," the doctor said, adjusting his clipboard. "That silver bullet should have killed you. But without a wolf's accelerated metabolism, the poison spread more slowly. What would have slaughtered a full-blooded werewolf merely severely wounded you?" I mentally scoffed at the irony that the inhibition that had been a source of pain and ridicule my whole life had saved me. The doctor moved closer and began performing routine checks, flashing a light into my eyes, checking my blood pressure and oxygen saturation, and performing a number of other procedures I was too tired to follow. "Everything looks good," he declared when he was done, and Kieran exhaled in relief. "The hard part's over," the doctor continued, "but your human biology means a longer recovery. No wolf healing for you." I managed a faint nod. I was alive by some miracle. No way was I going to bitch about the fact that it would take me a while to heal. The fog in my brain was beginning to clear slowly but surely, and the gravity of the situation fell heavily on me. Someone had shot me, with silver. This wasn't random violence. Kieran's warning after the rogue attack echoed in my skull. I'd been naive to think my family's disdain would protect me. A tremor racked my battered body. "Hey." Kieran's hand enveloped mine, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "You're safe now. I'm not going anywhere." His jaw clenched. "This won't happen again." I arched a brow. Why the sudden protectiveness? He gently, tenderly brushed my hair back from my forehead. "I'm not letting my son grow up without his mother," he said tightly. A fleeting pang went through me at the mention of Daniel. How was he? Was he hurt? Did he know I was hurt? "Sarah." Kieran's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "That mind of yours is working overtime. Stop. Just rest. I'm here." He shook his head. "I don't want you to worry about anything, okay? Just rest. I'm here." "But why?" The question burned behind my lips. The doctor, who I'd almost forgotten, chimed in. "Mrs. Blackthorne, you need serious recovery time. Your husband hasn't left this room in 48 hours, so you're in good hands." My eyelids finally cooperated, flying open. "Husband? 2 days? She'll rest now, doctor." Kieran's tone brooked no argument. "Thank you so much for everything." The doctor nodded. "Don't hesitate to alert the nurses if you need anything." Once we were alone, I opened my mouth and forced out the dry, cracked words. "You're not my husband." Kieran rolled his eyes. "All your identification documents still read Serafina Blackthorne, so..." He shrugged. "Damn it! I dragged my feet on changing the name, because even though I knew I was no longer a Blackthorne, I didn't feel like a Lockwood either. "Don't have to stay," I rasped. His grip tightened around my fingers. "Try and make me leave." I wanted to argue, assure him that hospital security would keep me safe, but the few words I'd said had drained me, and Kieran's hand was so warm and comforting around mine. "That's it," he murmured, stroking my head. "Sleep, Sarah. I'll be here when you wake. You're safe now." Against all logic, against the terror of being hunted, his presence anchored me. For the first time in years, I didn't fear the dark. Because the devil himself was keeping watch. Kieran's POV. I watched Sarah like a hawk. Just watched the steady rise and fall of Sarah's chest like it held the secrets of the universe. Even now, with her awake and resting, the image of her bleeding out on that bridge played behind my eyelids every time I closed them. How close I'd come to losing her. Again, our hands lay entwined on the hospital blanket. When was the last time we'd touched like this? Not during the divorce, not during our marriage. Had we ever? My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fished it out with my other hand, not wanting to let go of Sarah's. Margaret, my voice sounded rough even to me. I was about to call you. Her voice was shaky with anxiety when she said, "Did something happen? Is she okay? Is she?" She woke up. I cut off the panic before it could spiral. Margaret had been a ghost in these halls since the shooting, another casualty of this nightmare. First Edward, now Sarah. The grief hung on her like a second skin. She'd begged to take my place at Sarah's bedside. I'd refused. Not just because Margaret was barely holding herself together, but because the thought of walking away made my wolf snarl. "Oh, thank the gods," Margaret sobbed, and I heard a shuffle like she'd dropped into a chair. "How is she?" On initial examination, the doctor said everything looked good. She just has to rest a lot, and she has a long road of healing ahead of her. "But she'll live." Margaret's voice wobbled, thick with tears. "My daughter won't die?" The thought of Sarah dying was like my own silver bullet to the heart. "No." My thumb brushed Sarah's knuckles. "She's not going anywhere." Margaret let out a heavy sigh of relief. A pause, then so quiet I almost missed it. Do you think she'd want to see me?" I ground my teeth. Over the last couple of weeks since the funeral, Sarah had made it a point to stay away from her family, not hiding her intention to cut all ties. Even injured and enervated, she'd wanted me to leave. I could only imagine what kind of welcome Margaret would receive. "I think we should give her some space for now," I said carefully. "Let her fully recover, and you also need to rest, Margaret. You've gone through a lot of heartache in such a short time." Margaret sniffed. "I understand. Thank you, Kieran. I know you two are divorced, and you don't have to. She's Daniel's mother." The lie came easily. Divorced or not, she's my responsibility. At least, that's what I had been telling myself. Just as I hung up the phone with Margaret, Sarah's phone on the side table rang. An unfamiliar name flashed on Sarah's screen. Elaine. I answered warily. "Hello. How's my favorite wordsmith doing?" A woman's cheerful voice cut me off. "You ghosted me for 2 days. Writer's block? Look, I know divorce sucks. You could be in a mental slump, but you're newly single, girl. Go live a little. Your readers need that sequel. That man never deserved you anyway." I pulled the phone away from me, frowned at the name, and put it back. "Ma'am, I think you have the wrong number." There was a pause, and then, "Isn't this Sarah's phone?" "Well, yes, but—" "I'm Elaine, her editor. Could you kindly give the phone to her?" I was frowning so hard I probably had a unibrow. "Editor?" "Yeah, just as I've told you," she snapped. "Who is this?" "Kieran, her huss." I caught myself in time. It was one thing to let the hospital staff believe we were still married. It was another to introduce myself that way. "Her ex-husband." The temperature dropped. "Ah, the divorced ex-husband. Why do you have her phone?" "Lady, what do you mean by editor?" A dry laugh. "Oh, this is rich. She said you didn't know." "Know what? That your ex-wife is a best-selling author? That she's sold 500,000 books worldwide under a pen name?" My mouth fell open, and I glanced at Sarah sleeping peacefully, if unaware of the bomb that had just been dropped on my head. She was an author? What the fuck? I'd vaguely wondered why she never asked for money, but I chalked it up to the fact that she subsisted off the Lockwood family funds and never thought of it twice. All those hours she'd spent locked in her room. She hadn't been hiding. She'd been writing, building a career for herself. Elaine's voice sharpened. "Now that I've satisfied your curiosity, put Sarah on." "She's unavailable." "What does that mean?" I exhaled. "She's in the hospital. There was an incident." Elaine gasped. "Oh, poor Sarah. Is she okay? Can I come to see her?" "She will be." My grip tightened on the phone. "But no visitors yet." "Take care of her, Kieran." Elaine's tone held a warning. I looked at the woman who'd been my wife for 10 years, the woman I'd never truly known. I swallowed. "Yeah, I will." After I hung up, I grabbed my phone and typed out Sarah's pen name into my Google search. My jaw dropped at the results. She went by only Serafina, neither Blackthorn nor Lockwood, and over the past decade she'd published more than 10 books. A Forbes 6-star average, a devoted fan base. My breath left me in a rush, guilt curdling in my chest. I turned to look at her, sleeping soundly in the hospital bed. How isolated from me had she felt that she'd kept this part of her hidden? We'd shared a life, a child, and yet we'd truly been strangers all these years. The walls of the room suddenly felt too close, the air too thick. I needed to get out. I pushed off the stool beside her bed, my muscles stiff from days of barely moving. But as I swung the door open, I froze. Ethan stood there, fist raised to knock, Celeste hovering behind him. "Hey," Ethan exhaled. "Mom called us and said Sarah had woken up." I nodded, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door shut behind me. "She did, but she's asleep again." His jaw tightened. "How is she?" "She's Celeste cut in, catching my hand. "How are you?" "Fine." "No, you're not." She shouldered past Ethan, her sky-high heels putting her nearly at my eye level. Her fingers framed my face, her blue eyes roaming all over me. "When was the last time you slept?" I shrugged. "Someone had to watch over Sarah." Her grip tightened. "Not you. You don't owe her anything, Key." A tired sigh escaped me. "She's Daniel's mother, Celeste. I won't let my son grow up without his mother." She huffed. "Look at you." She cupped my cheek, her thumb swiping under my eye. "You're dead on your feet." Ethan patted me on the shoulder. "You should go home, man. Get some rest. We'll take it from here." But my feet stayed rooted to the floor, an instinctive resistance flaring in my chest. Sarah and her siblings had never been close, and after everything, I couldn't shake the need to shield her from the family that had failed her so badly. "Hypocrite," a bitter voice hissed in my head. "You hurt her worse than any of them." She hadn't even trusted me enough to share her writing. Kieran. Celeste drew my attention back to her. "Go home, please. We'll take care of Sarah." The weight of exhaustion pressed down on me, undeniable now. "Yeah, okay." I turned to Ethan. "Don't leave her alone. We still don't know if the threat's passed." He gave a grim nod. Celeste tilted my chin back to her. "Stop worrying. Go." This time, I nodded. It happened in a heartbeat. Celeste smiled, her eyes trained on my lips, but just before she could make contact, I shifted, and her lips pressed against my jaw instead. I forced a smile, trying to cover up my uneasiness and surprise at what I'd just done. Brief confusion and hurt flashed in Celeste's eyes, but she covered it up and stepped back, her hands falling from my face. "Go on, now," she murmured, too soft, too careful. I nodded and forced my legs to move away from Sarah's door. The phantom warmth of Celeste's lips still burned against my skin, and I couldn't explain why I'd moved, why I'd avoided it. Celeste and I had been affectionate since she returned, teasing touches, lingering hugs, but we hadn't kissed. Not once. And now, striding through the parking lot, I realized that it hadn't been an accident. It made no fucking sense. I'd spent 10 years aching for her, so why did the thought of kissing her now feel wrong? Like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. Like if I did, there would be no going back. But where was this feeling exactly from? My mind flashed to Sarah in the locker room, her palm cracking across my face before I could close the distance between us. I hadn't hesitated then. But with Celeste, the realization sat in my gut like bad sushi as I slid into my car, the metallic tang of Sarah's blood still clinging to the upholstery. Serafina's pove. I'd been wrong. When I clawed my way back to consciousness, the space beside my bed was empty. No brooding alpha, no Kieran, just Ethan and Celeste hovering like vultures over a kill. What the fuck? My tongue felt oddly weightless, but the bitterness in my chest was lead heavy. "Oh, Sarah!" Celeste lunged for my hand with performative sympathy. I yanked back before she could touch me. Ethan's throat worked as he studied everything in the room, the IV snaking into my arm, the EKG's steady blips, the starch-white pillows, anything but my face. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been fucking shot," I rasped. A muscle ticked in his jaw. "We're sorry this happened to you." The sarcasm burned on my tongue. "Oh, are you? Sorry enough to finally acknowledge I exist?" But the raw guilt in his eyes choked it back. "Thanks," I muttered instead. Then, like a masochist, I asked, "Where's Kieran?" Celeste went rigid. Ethan answered too quickly. "We made him go home, get some rest." "Of course." The logic was sound. He'd earned the break after playing dutiful watch. Shortly after that, a nurse came in to administer my medication and painkillers. Then she inclined the hospital bed so I was sitting up slightly. When she was done, she reassured me that I was doing as well as could be expected, and I took a deep breath of relief, then regretted it thanks to the stabbing pain in my chest. "Do you need anything?" Ethan asked when she was gone. "Food? Water?" I was about to remind him that the nurse had just said I couldn't eat solid foods just yet when Celeste beat me to it. "Could I get a latte, please, Ethan?" He raised a brow. "We're at a hospital, Celeste. They have exactly one kind of coffee, instant." She rolled her eyes. "Fine, that." Ethan turned to me. "What about you?" I smiled. "I'm good, thanks." He nodded. "I'll be right back." As soon as the door closed behind Ethan, I closed my eyes. Things were definitely awkward between Celeste and me, and I knew she probably felt guilty about our last conversation and wouldn't want to. You conniving, manipulative bitch. My eyes flew open to see my sister looming over my hospital bed, her perfect face twisted with venom. "Excuse me?" The words scraped raw against my throat. "I thought I knew every seductive tactic in the book." Celeste sneered at me. "But getting yourself shot to get Kieran's attention?" She slow clapped, each mocking clap stinging worse than the gunshot wound. "That's on another level, Sarah." I actually laughed, a hoarse, painful sound. "Are you fucking serious?" "Please." She leaned in, her designer perfume choking me. "You've always been pathetic when it comes to Kieran. But this?" She gestured to my bandages. "This is desperate." The heart monitor spiked as I struggled upright. "You think a white-hot bolt of pain silenced me," Celeste smirked. "Weak, pathetic, exactly what he'll remember when this little stunt fades." For the first time, I saw her clearly. Not my baby sister, but a viper who'd been poisoning my life for years. "Get out." My voice dropped to a growl. "I'll surely leave." She flicked my IV line. "But make no mistake. I meant it when I said I would take back everything that's mine," she said sharply. "But maybe as revenge, I'll take something that's yours, too." I narrowed my eyes. "What are you talking about?" Celeste's lips curled into a viper's smile. "Kieran only tolerates you because you whelped his heir." Her manicured finger tapped my IV pole. "So maybe I'll take Daniel as my own, raise him properly, as my son." The heart monitor shrieked alongside my pulse. Celeste's smirk widened. "How would you like that, Sarah? Danny calling me mommy?" The door clicked open. Ethan walked in, a bottle of water in one hand and a cup of coffee in the other, steam rising over the rim. Later, I wouldn't remember deciding to move, only the scalding arc of dark liquid, Celeste's scream like shattered glass, and the burn of satisfaction deeper than any wound. "You psychotic bitch!" Celeste wailed, swiping at her face and pulling her drenched top away from her. "You hateful piece of shit!" Ethan's mouth hung open, the empty water bottle slipping from his grip. "Jesus Christ, Sarah! Out!" The word tore from my raw throat. My oxygen tube slithered away as I heaved, but I kept my glare locked on Celeste. "Before I pour the next one on your face!" The nurse came bursting in, her eyes wide when she beheld the commotion. "Get them out!" I screamed, wheezing. "I don't want to see their faces." I collapsed against the pillows, desperately gasping for air. The cannula had slipped onto the bed and my hand moved wildly, trying to reach for it. I could still hear Celeste sobbing and hurling insults at me. The nurse politely, then firmly telling my siblings to leave, and then, "Shh, it's okay." I didn't know if my vision was blurring because of my tears or the gradual asphyxiation, but then I felt someone gently fit the cannula back into my nostrils, and I took a grateful breath. The room was silent again, and I heard the warm voice say, "It's okay. I'm a friend. She just chased away her siblings now, I don't think." I turned my head, my vision clearing slightly, and I smiled softly. "It's okay," I said weakly. "He can stay." Lucian shot the nurse a charming smile. "See? The lady vouches for me." The nurse finally left, and Lucian turned the smile on me. My, Sarah, your life is one big roller coaster, isn't it?" Kieran's Pove. I woke with a snarl, my wolf already clawing at my ribs before my eyes found the clock. 2 fucking hours. I'd meant to shower, sleep for 30 minutes, just enough to take the edge off, then get back to Sarah. Instead, I slept for over 2 hours. I hastily threw on clothes and shoes and was out of the house in 2 minutes. The drive to the hospital was a blur of growling engines and worse scenarios. Had she woken in pain? Had she asked for me? I took the stairs 3 at a time, my pulse roaring, only to freeze at the sight outside her door. Ethan sat slumped, hands clenched like he was praying. Celeste looked like she'd been dipped in coffee, her silk blouse ruined, face mottled red. What the hell happened? My voice came out gravel rough. They both looked up at me. Celeste sniffled. Key. But my attention was on Ethan. You promised you wouldn't leave her side, I said. Why are you outside and not with her? Ethan glanced at Celeste and annoyance flashed in his eyes. She kicked us out, he said to me. Why? Again, Ethan looked at Celeste and she simply rolled her eyes, glaring down at her stained shirt. What does it matter? Ethan said. Besides, he nodded towards the door. No, he's here. I frowned. Who? Lucian Reed. My body moved before my mind could catch up and I drew open the door to Sarah's room. The first thing that hit my ears was laughter, sweet and musical. Stop, Sarah was saying amidst fits of giggles. You're going to make me tear a stitch. I froze for a second, stunned by the look of pure joy on her face as she threw her head back against the pillows, giggling uncontrollably at whatever Lucian fucking Reed said. Then her eyes met mine across the room and she froze too. And like someone drawing blinds to keep the sun away, her entire expression shuddered. Her smile faded, her eyes hardened, and a blast of frigid air filled the room. Get out, she said icily. My jaw went slack. She'd asked me to leave the day before, too, but not like this. This was ice, the kind that froze rivers from the bottom up. Lucian was seated on the seat I had occupied over the last 2 days, a gift basket at his feet. An illogical, irrational part of me told me he was trying to replace me. I took a step into the room. Sarah. I said out. Her voice could have flashed frozen hell. The heart monitor spiked as her breath turned ragged. Take your pack of hypocrites with you. What the hell had happened in the 3 hours I was gone? Had she just been too weak earlier to treat me this way, or had something else occurred? Regardless of her words, I stepped further into the room, and her face tightened with anger. Are you deaf? She snapped, and my eyes widened as her chest started to rise and fall rapidly. I said, Sarah, Lucian said softly, taking her hand in his, calm down, don't overwork yourself. My eyes zeroed in on Lucian's hand in Sarah's, and my vision tinged green with jealousy as she turned to him and offered him a soft smile. Are you kidding me? The words tore out of me raw. She turned back to me as I entered the room. I'm the one who's been by your side for the past 2 days while you teetered between life and death. I glared at Lucian in disgust. Shows up with a gift basket and deserves your affection? Her laugh was hollow. Funny. I don't recall asking for your vigil. That look in her eyes, like I was nothing. Like our decade together had evaporated. The truth hit like a silver bullet. The woman I married was gone, and the one left behind hated me,